I was 5 hours deep into the silence when I first noticed something was off. Not loud, not sudden, just off. That low hum of wrongness that you only hear when everything else goes still. It was that peculiar sort of silence that lives only in the deep woods, too full of absence, too empty of life. The kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums and makes you wonder if your hearing's gone or if the forest just decided to stop breathing. My name's Caleb, and I've been solo camping for nearly 8 years now. 36 years old, no kids, no wife, just me, the road, and the woods. I bought my first RV back in 2017 after losing my brother in a rollover accident in Arizona. That moment cracked something open in me, made me crave the wild, the lonely. I wanted silence, peace, space to think. I thought the national forests would give that to me. And they did. Until this last trip. Until the forest decided it wanted me to hear something else. It was mid-October when I set out for this one. I'd been watching the weather like a hawk. That's one of the first rules you learn when you camp alone. Don't mess around with mountain storms. I picked a spot up near the Kaibab National Forest in northern Arizona, elevation just high enough to get some cool nights, but not enough to risk snow. I'd been there once before, years back with my brother. We hiked the rim, saw some elk, grilled under the stars. I wanted to go back, alone this time. I remember the ranger station being closed when I drove past it. Just a locked gate and a sign warning about fire restrictions. No other cars on the access road, no campers parked in the forest turnouts. That should have comforted me. I usually like it when I've got the land to myself, but this time, I noticed that little flicker of hesitation in my gut. That small voice that said, "You're really alone out here." I silenced it, like I always do. I found a clearing about 20 miles in. One of those perfect dispersed camping spots just off a logging road, wide enough for my Class B RV, shaded by tall ponderosa pines, with a slight slope that let rain run off easy. No cell service, but I'd brought my Garmin. I always do. That's another rule. Redundancy. Maps, GPS, backup battery, flare gun. You plan for what can go wrong so nothing surprises you, or at least that's what I used to think. The first day was quiet, peaceful even. I set up camp around 2 p.m., leveled the RV, checked for fresh scat or tracks. Nothing out of the ordinary. Cooked some canned stew over the fire ring, cracked open a beer, sat on the tailgate, and watched the sky turn purple behind the trees. It was everything I wanted. That night, I slept like a stone. It wasn't until the second night that things started changing. It began with a sound, or maybe the absence of one. Usually, forests don't sleep. Even in October, you'll hear the skitter of mice, the call of an owl, maybe a coyote way off in the hills. But sometime after 2 a.m., I woke up in total silence. Not a whisper of wind, not a branch creak, just stillness. It was like the trees were holding their breath. I stayed in bed, staring up at the roof of the van, waiting for the noise to return. It didn't. Then I heard a tap. It was soft, sharp, like a fingernail against glass. I propped myself up, heart kicking into gear, listened. Another tap, then another. It was coming from the passenger window. I pulled the curtain back a sliver. Nothing there, just trees and dark and the vague outline of my side mirror. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then tap, closer now. Lower. I swung the curtain fully open. Still nothing. My breath fogged the glass. My heart thudded. You ever try to explain fear to someone who's never truly been alone in the wild? You can't, because it's not just the fear of something out there. It's the fear of your own mind, the realization that your instincts are screaming and your logic is telling you to ignore them, that tearing tension between you're fine and get out now. I didn't leave. Of course not. I told myself it was pine cones or a branch in the wind, or maybe something settling in the RV frame. But the next morning I walked the site and I found the prints, small human-shaped prints, bare feet, not boots, not paws, just 5 little toes pressed into the dirt near my fire pit, right beneath the passenger side window. No other signs, no tire marks, no dragging, no trash, just those prints. I took a picture. I don't know why, maybe to prove to myself later that it really happened, that it wasn't just a weird dream. Then I brushed them away and told myself what I needed to. Could be kids, local hikers, someone messing around. But my gut wasn't buying it. Still, I stayed. Because that's what I do. Because part of me still believed I was in control. That if I just followed the rules, checked the weather, bring backup power, stay alert, I could outsmart whatever dangers were lurking out there. That night, I didn't light a fire, didn't cook, ate cold beans from a can, and locked all the doors. I sat in the driver's seat until midnight, just watching, listening. Nothing happened. But just before I drifted off, I heard the breathing. It was faint. So faint, I thought I was imagining it. A slow, rhythmic exhale, coming from outside the driver's side door, too loud for an animal, too steady. I froze, listened again, and then it stopped. I waited there, paralyzed, for 2 hours. My fingers hovered near the ignition. I told myself not to overreact, not to make noise, not to shine a light. Whatever it was, it wanted me to notice, and I wouldn't give it that satisfaction. At dawn, I got out and checked again. No prints this time. No scuffs in the pine needles, but the smell hit me first. It was faint, sour, like turned milk or wet wool, a smell that didn't belong. I paced the clearing, trying to place it. Then I saw something hanging in the tree. It was a length of twine, tied into a crude loop, hanging just high enough that I wouldn't have seen it from the RV. There was a feather tucked into the knot, and right beneath it, carved into the bark, was a symbol, a spiral, rough and wide. Maybe done with a rock or blade. Not an animal, not a random camper. Someone had been there, watching me. I stood there for a long time, just staring at that spiral. Something about it hit a nerve I didn't know I had. Not because it looked particularly menacing, it was crude, shaky, uneven, but because it felt deliberate, like it had been left for me. A message I didn't understand, or wasn't supposed to. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to disturb whatever it was or risk triggering something worse. I just stood back, heart pounding like I'd been running, and snapped a photo on my phone even though I had no service. Like that mattered. I thought about packing up right then. I really did. But there was this strange stubbornness in me, something I still don't fully understand. It wasn't pride. It was more like defiance. Like if I left too soon, I'd be admitting that something had power over me, that the fear was justified. And in the wild, the second you believe your prey, you become it. So I stayed another night, but I moved the RV. About a quarter mile up the logging road, there was another clearing, tighter, rougher ground, more closed in by brush. No obvious fire ring. It didn't look like it had been used recently, which made me feel a little safer, or maybe just less watched. I didn't unpack this time. I didn't sit outside. I didn't eat. I just parked, shut the engine off, closed every window shade, and sat inside the dark, trying to make sense of the situation. But my thoughts were like static, jumbled, looped. Why bare feet? Who would be out there barefoot in the cold? Why a spiral? Was it tribal, symbolic, or just nonsense? Was it a prank, a trap, a warning? My mind kept circling that same pit, falling deeper into it. I couldn't sleep, couldn't stop glancing toward the black windows like they were eyes. Around 1:40 a.m., the radio turned on. I didn't touch anything. No music, no voices, just white noise, hissing low through the speakers, like a breath drawn in and never let out. I reached forward, hand trembling, and clicked the power button. It wouldn't turn off. I turned the knob, pressed every switch, unplugged the USB cord. Still, the static held on, like a hum in the walls, faint but undeniable. Then the lights above the kitchenette flickered, just once, like a pulse, and the static went silent. I sat frozen, breath locked tight in my chest, staring at the ceiling like it had just blinked at me. I told myself it was a wiring issue. I've got a good solar rig, but maybe I drained the battery. Maybe there was a short, a loose ground. But when I checked the readout, the power system was fine, full charge, normal output, nothing explained it. And then the knocking came back. Not taps this time, not playful or tentative, just 3 sharp knocks on the rear door of the RV. Then silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe. And then, again, 3 knocks. Deliberate, rhythmic, like a door-to-door salesman trying to sell something at midnight in the middle of nowhere. And then a voice. Low, male, barely a whisper. Let me in. I didn't answer. I don't think I could have spoken if I tried. My mouth felt sewn shut. My whole body had gone tight and weightless, like I was floating inside my own fear. I heard him move. Soft footsteps, bare feet again from the sound of it, crunching pine needles as he circled the vehicle. I tracked him with my ears, every shuffle louder than it should have been, like the quiet made room for it to echo. He stopped by the driver's door, knocked once. Let me in, Caleb? My stomach turned inside out. I didn't know how he knew my name. I hadn't spoken to a soul since I arrived. Didn't post my location. Didn't leave a note. My plates were registered in a different state, under an LLC. There was no way to know, unless he'd been watching me for longer than I realized, unless he never left. I slid into the driver's seat as quietly as I could. Keys were already in the ignition, but I didn't turn it. Not yet. My hand hovered over the gear shift, sweating. And then I saw movement. A shadow, just beyond the side mirror. Tall, thin, bare. He didn't look like a hiker. Didn't move like one, either. His limbs were stiff, wrong, like they were learning how to bend. He stepped closer to the driver's side window and smiled. That was when I turned the engine. Threw it into reverse, didn't even check for trees, just floored it backwards, slammed over a stump or rock, something crunched beneath the tires, and then I cut the wheel hard and peeled onto the logging road, throwing gravel. I drove fast, recklessly fast, headlights jittering through the pines. The forest pressing in tight on either side, every corner a blind turn. But I didn't care. I needed to be out, gone, anywhere but there. I didn't stop driving until I hit the edge of the forest and found signal again. I pulled over on a gravel shoulder, shaking, breath shallow, hands numb from the grip on the wheel. Checked my mirrors, nothing behind me. Checked the door, locked. And then I grabbed my phone and pulled up the photos I'd taken, the footprint, the spiral, the twine loop. But the photo of the symbol was gone, just black. The thumbnail was there like a file existed, but when I opened it, the screen was pure void. No data, no image. I tried loading it again, still black. That was 2 nights ago. I haven't gone back. I don't plan to. And I haven't told anyone. Not really. Who would believe it? Even I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. The part that haunts me the most isn't the knocking or the smell or the voice that said my name. It's the symbol, that spiral. I keep seeing it. When I close my eyes, in the grain of the RV dashboard, in the frost on my windshield the next morning, it's following me. Or maybe it was always there. I left that forest behind. At least I thought I did. I spent the next day driving with no clear destination. Just road, mile after mile of winding 2 lanes through the mountains, like I could outrun what had happened if I just stayed in motion. But the truth is, the forest never really let go. It clung to the inside of my skull like mold. I pulled into a public rest area near Helena, Montana late that afternoon. Not a forest. Not isolated. Nothing that should have made me uneasy. There were other vehicles, an RV or two, some truckers idling their rigs, bright signs, trash bins, bathrooms, a place people came through often. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had come with me. I kept catching glimpses of that spiral. In the condensation on the rear window, in the water droplets on my sink faucet, I wiped it away again and again, but it would return. I sat in the driver's seat that night and tried to rationalize. That's what I always do, in the end. It's a survival reflex, not denial. Just a need to control the narrative before it spirals. Before I spiral. You were sleep-deprived. You hallucinated the voice. The smell could have come from a dead animal nearby. The radio static, a glitch, an electrical hiccup. The shadow was just your own. The spiral was just a pattern you're obsessed with now. You're seeing it because you're looking for it. That should have helped. But none of it stuck. What I couldn't explain, what I still can't, is how he said my name. And how I started seeing other spirals, ones I didn't make, ones I hadn't photographed. There was one etched into the condensation on the outside of my window when I woke up the next morning. Outside. I stared at it for a long time before wiping it away. It smeared under my hand like ash, not frost, not dirt, just something off. I left the rest area immediately. I didn't want to stay parked longer than I had to. I drove south toward Yellowstone, not to camp, just to move, just to not be still. But the unease traveled with me, in the way my tires seemed louder than usual on the asphalt, in the hollow creaks of my suspension, even on straightaways, in how the wind would whistle oddly through the edges of my passenger window like it was trying to speak. I kept checking my rearview mirror, not because I saw something, because I felt something, like there was always just one more thing I hadn't looked at yet, one more frame behind the last, something hiding just out of view. I finally stopped again in a grocery store parking lot in Idaho Falls, a big box chain, fluorescent lights, families, shopping carts squealing over the pavement. I parked between two big pickups and just sat there with the windows down, letting the noise of life in. And that's when I saw her, a woman, mid-40s maybe, tan face, weathered, dark green hiking pack slung over one shoulder. She wasn't shopping, wasn't going anywhere. She was just watching me, not in a casual way, not passing interest. It was locked, eyes trained hard on my windshield, on me. She crossed the lot slowly and stopped just in front of the RV. Then she made a slow, deliberate spiral in the air with her finger. I didn't get out. I didn't even roll up the window. I just sat there, hands frozen on my lap, watching her finger trace that endless curl in the air. Then she walked away. Didn't say a word. Didn't look back. I stayed the night in that parking lot, left the engine off, tried to sleep, couldn't. Around 3 a.m., something started hitting the roof of the RV. Light, random, like a handful of pebbles being tossed from different angles. I opened the roof vent just a crack, nothing there. Then I heard it. A single word, whispered. Soon. I don't know how much longer I can do this. I used to be the guy who loved being alone out here. Loved the silence, the freedom, the detachment from people, from cities, from the buzzing static of modern life. But now that silence is poisoned. Now it's filled with waiting. I tried going back to civilization, rented a cheap motel room in Boise for a few days just to be around walls that weren't on wheels. Slept with the light on. Let the TV play in the background all night. White noise used to calm me. Now it just makes me flinch. And still I kept seeing the spiral, in the swirls of spilled coffee on the lobby counter, in the condensation on the bathroom mirror, even in the dust pattern on the motel dresser, like someone had drawn it with a finger. That was when I realized something truly sickening. It wasn't following me. It had marked me. Whatever it was, whatever I stirred up out there in that forest, I didn't just encounter it. I invited it. And I don't know how to uninvite it. I tried everything to shake it. Salt around the RV doors, burning sage like I'd read online. I even found an old half-remembered prayer my grandmother used to say when she thought something evil was near. I whispered it into the dark like a chant. But it didn't stop. The spiral showed up again, this time carved into the wooden picnic table outside a new campsite I'd pulled into near the edge of the Sawtooth National Forest. I hadn't left the RV yet. I hadn't even unpacked, and yet the mark was there. It wasn't old. The wood was fresh, flaked, raw, like someone had cut it into the surface just minutes before. It was no longer a coincidence. This was targeted. I wasn't alone out here anymore. But the worst part, the worst, was the voice that followed. It didn't yell. It didn't growl. It whispered. It always whispered. At 2:13 a.m., I heard it again, from outside, just under the driver's side window, too low to see without opening the door. It whispered my name, but not in the way someone speaks to another human. It was like it was tasting it. Shine. Long, drawn out, like the syllables were something delicious. My blood ran cold. I didn't move. Not a muscle. I just lay flat in the bed above the cab, barely breathing. Then it spoke again. Open the door. I didn't. I couldn't. And yet some horrible part of me wanted to. That was the part that scared me the most. Not what was outside, but the quiet, mutinous voice inside me whispering, why not? That's what being alone too long does. It turns your thoughts into enemies. Your instincts get twisted. Fear becomes seductive. You start to think maybe if you just give in, The pressure will stop. The spiral will end. It didn't stop. Not that night, not the next. It followed me. I fled again, south this time, Utah, wide open roads, dry air, a different terrain, a different rhythm. I hoped that maybe distance could dilute it, but the spiral was waiting there too. I parked near Capitol Reef at a quiet, primitive site in the desert scrub. Red rock in all directions. No trees, no forest, nothing to hide in. That was my logic. If it couldn't hide, it couldn't come. I was wrong. That night, something knocked, not on the door, not the walls. It knocked underneath, from beneath the RV. I laid flat against the bed, ears straining. It was faint, like someone tapping lightly against the undercarriage with a stick. Tap, tap, tap. Then silence. Then the knock came again, but this time from the ceiling. It was like something had passed straight through the RV, from bottom to top. I bolted upright, heart jackhammering in my chest, and saw nothing but shadows overhead. No branches, no trees, nothing to explain it. That's when I knew. This wasn't bound to a forest. It wasn't a place. It was me. And the spiral? It wasn't a symbol. It was a door. And I had opened it. I didn't tell anyone. Who could I tell? Hi, I think I picked up a paranormal parasite while boondocking alone in Montana. Nobody prepares you for this. Not the RV blogs, not the gear reviews, not the YouTube videos about solo van life and freedom on the open road. They don't warn you that sometimes freedom can leave you wide open, vulnerable, exposed, alone in ways that no other lifestyle could make you. It's not the wildlife that'll get you. It's the void, that creeping emptiness just outside the glow of your campfire, the silence that stretches too long, the feeling that something is noticing you, but not with curiosity, with intent. I gave up trying to outrun it. That was my next mistake. I decided to confront it. I returned to the forest, not the same site, but nearby. I traced back my route through Idaho, crossed into Montana, and found a different logging road. Less traveled, deeper. I parked just after dusk, shut off the engine, stepped outside. I stood still. The quiet pressed in like wet wool, no insects, no breeze, not even the rustle of squirrels in the underbrush. It was as if the forest was waiting. I opened the storage hatch, pulled out a small can of gasoline I kept for emergencies, and poured it in a slow circle around the RV. Then I lit it. The flame crawled up in a ring of orange and blue, casting wild shadows into the trees. And I waited. "Come on," I whispered. "You want me? I'm right here." Nothing, just the crackle of fire and the sudden, sharp scent of burning pine needles. Then, movement, just outside the ring of light. A tall shape. Wrong proportions. Shoulders too narrow, arms too long, no face I could see, just the silhouette. Like a human who had forgotten how to be one. It didn't step forward, it leaned from the waist. Leaning until its head, if it had a head, hung sideways in the firelight like a pendulum, and it whispered something. Not my name this time, just one word. Stay. The fire hissed louder. I felt heat climb up my back. Smoke burned my eyes. I turned and got back inside the RV. Locked the door. The figure didn't move. It didn't need to. Because I understood now. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted to make me stay. It wanted me to join the spiral, to become part of it. That's what it did to solo campers. Not all of them. Just the ones who noticed it. The ones too far gone to call for help. The ones who already felt that emptiness long before they ever heard the whisper. I didn't sleep. Not that night. Not for many nights after. I kept moving. West, then south, then anywhere. I drove until my hands ached on the wheel and the road blurred into a meaningless smear. I didn't care where I stopped anymore. Gas station lots, rest stops, even just the shoulder of back highways. Places with no trees, no forest, no place for the whisper to take root. But I could still feel it. Inside the RV. Inside me. The spiral wasn't just a mark anymore. It had grown legs. Roots. It burrowed down into my habits, into the cracks in my logic. It waited for the moments I let my guard slip. When I got tired, hungry, lonely. It fed on the alone. One night outside a closed visitor center somewhere near the Nevada border, I found a pamphlet fluttering under my windshield wiper. It wasn't from the Rangers. No logo, no organization. Just a photo of a camper, half buried in moss, and a single line printed beneath it. Shh, they left their door open. That was it. No contact info, no signature, and the spiral drawn scrawled, etched in black pen across the top like a brand. I hadn't told anyone. How did they know? I didn't want to believe it, but part of me did. Maybe I wasn't the only one. Maybe others had seen it too. The pattern, the thing behind the trees, the whispering. Maybe the spiral was more than a symbol or a spirit. Maybe it was a warning, or worse, a community, a secret one, built not with handshakes but silence, bound not by rules but by what we couldn't say anymore without being called crazy. Something you only joined by accident and only escaped if you never looked back. I tore the pamphlet in half, then quarters, then fed it into my camp stove fire and watched it curl into ash. But I remembered the phrase, "They left their door open." That's all it takes out here. One slip, one broken lock, 1 second of trust in the wrong place. The truth is, and it took me months of spiraling to admit this, solo RV camping is not for everyone. Not because of bears or weather or engine failure. It's because of the silence. The profound, endless, echoing silence, and the way it starts to fill in with things, thoughts, doubts, memories you haven't touched in years, whispers that sound like voices you recognize, eyes you swear are watching you from the dark just beyond your campfire's edge. And the spiral, it's not a mark. It's a path, a way down. I met a guy once at a dump station near the Arizona line. He was old, feral almost. RV looked like it hadn't moved in years. He wore a necklace made of old matchbooks. Most of them were from campgrounds, places I recognized. He saw the way I was watching him and said something I never forgot. You can't be out here long and not see it. The shape, the pattern. But the ones who try to follow it, they don't come back. The spiral doesn't loop. It goes down. He smiled with too many teeth. Then he drove off without dumping his tanks. And me? I've stopped running. I park near towns now, not in them, but close enough to see their glow on the horizon. I keep my doors locked, my lights dim, my awareness sharp. I avoid long stays, 2 nights max, and I move on. I don't leave the RV after dark, ever. I don't trust new faces who seem too friendly. I don't speak my name aloud when I'm alone, and I never, not once, leave the door open, even when it knocks, even when it begs, even when it cries like a child in the woods. I used to think the forest was the danger, but now I know the truth. The real danger of solo RV camping in national forests isn't the forest at all. It's what you bring into it, your fear, your isolation, your desire to prove something, because the spiral feeds on those things. It waits for people like me, and maybe like you. So if you ever find yourself miles off the highway, tucked into a quiet stand of trees, campfire low, stars high, and you hear a knock, a whisper, a scrape beneath your rig, whatever you do, don't open the door. I used to think of the Ozarks as a kind of forgotten paradise, a place where the trees don't just whisper in the wind, they remember you. That's the way it felt the first time I drove down those winding 2-lane highways with the windows down and no destination locked in. It was early October, and the leaves had just begun to burn orange at the tips. The air carried that sharpness you only get before the real cold settles in, the kind that wakes you up and makes you feel alive. I'd been on the road for almost 2 months by then, full-time RVing in a weathered old Winnebago I'd bought off a retired couple from Arkansas. No specific plans, just me, a camera, my notebook, and the road. I'd hit dozens of campgrounds, some free, some paid, most quiet, and all part of that quiet healing I'd come to crave after a bitter divorce and an even messier fallout with my corporate life. The Ozarks called to me. I don't know how else to put it. I kept hearing about how gorgeous they were this time of year, how the air felt cleaner, how the stars could shake something loose in your chest. It felt like a sign, or maybe it just felt far enough from everything I wanted to leave behind. The site I ended up at wasn't on any of the big apps. Not HipCamp, not Campendium, not even the Forest Service's own map. I'd met an older guy named Dennis at a gas station near Jasper, and he mentioned a little clearing tucked into the woods down a logging trail. "Ain't many know about it," he told me, half chewing on a toothpick and half glaring at my California plates. "You looking for peace and quiet? You'll find it out there." I should have asked why he said it like that, but I didn't. I was tired. I was chasing solitude. And honestly, the fewer people, the better. It took a solid hour to get there. The road turned to gravel, then to dirt, then to something that barely counted as road at all, more like tracks through the brush, the kind that scrape your undercarriage and make you grip the wheel like it might fall off. But when I finally reached the clearing, I understood why Dennis had pointed me that way. The land opened up like a secret, a soft, bowl-shaped hollow surrounded on all sides by pine and oak, with just enough of a slope to catch the morning sun. No trash, no beer cans, just the scent of bark, distant bird calls, and that deep, ancient silence you only get in places that people forgot. I parked the RV facing the slope and stepped outside. It was almost too quiet. No hum of nearby roads, no campers chattering, just the wind moving through the leaves like a breath too big for the forest. I took a deep one in, and I remember thinking, finally, this is what I came for. That first night was uneventful, peaceful even. I made a little fire, ate a can of beans over the flame, scribbled a few thoughts in my notebook. Around 10, the wind died down completely, and I realized I could hear my own heartbeat if I stayed still enough. It was like the land was holding its breath. And then, not in any dramatic way, just gently, the unease began. It started with the feeling that I wasn't alone. Now look, I've camped solo enough to know your mind can play tricks on you out in the woods. Every branch snap sounds like a bear. Every gust of wind feels directional, intentional. I'd learned to ride those nerves out, usually. But that night, something felt different. Like the woods were too aware of me. Like the trees were listening a little too closely. Around midnight, I heard footsteps, not animals, not deer, human footsteps. Crisp leaves crunching one after the other, but slow and steady somewhere just past the fire's edge. I turned off my headlamp, listened. Nothing. Then, again, closer this time, I stood up, firelight flickering across my chest, and called out, "Hey, I'm camped here." Silence. I grabbed my flashlight, scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. Nothing replied. And that silence, it wasn't passive. It was expectant, like whatever was out there wanted me to speak again. But I didn't. I didn't want to give it anything else. Instead, I walked around the RV slowly, making sure all the compartments were closed, the doors locked. My boots felt too loud in the leaves. Every crunch made me wince. Finally, I crawled into bed with my flashlight beside me. I told myself, maybe it was just some hiker, some hunter. Maybe I imagined it. But my gut knew better. The next morning, there were boot prints. Not mine. They circled the RV once, twice, then stopped at the rear window and vanished into the tree line. And here's the part that stuck with me more than anything else. They weren't fresh. The leaves had already settled inside the impressions, as if whoever it was had been there before I even arrived. I wanted to leave. I should have left. But something held me there, not fear exactly, not yet. More like obsession. I had to know who else knew about this spot. I had to prove it wasn't what I thought. So I stayed another night. I kept the fire low and sat inside the RV this time, on a lay, lights off, blinds cracked, watching, listening. It was quiet for hours. Too quiet again. Then, just after 1 a.m., the knocking started. Not on the door, not on the window, on the roof. 3 knocks. Solid. Measured. Right above the bedroom. Then silence. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. Not for a full 10 minutes. Then it came again. 3 knocks. This time at the front of the roof, above the cab. Like someone crawling forward. I slid off the bed and onto the floor. My flashlight was in the kitchen. Too far. I didn't want to move. I didn't want them to know I was awake. No footsteps, no thumps. Just those knocks, always 3. Never hurried. Never rushed. Eventually, they stopped. But I didn't sleep. When the sun finally dragged itself over the ridge, I went outside with my camera, looking for tracks, scuffs, anything. There was dew on the roof, but no footprints, no smears, no sign anyone had been up there at all. But I know what I heard. I packed up that morning, or I tried to, but when I turned the ignition, the RV didn't start. Battery was fine, gas tank full, engine just clicked like it was being choked. I sat there in the driver's seat, hands trembling, and felt that sense again, that watching. But now it was more than that. It was expectation, like the woods were waiting to see what I'd do next, like I'd stepped into some old forgotten game, and I had no idea what the rules were. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, the sound of that clicking starter echoing louder in my ears than it should have. The RV was still, too still. No breeze, no bird calls, not even the rustle of squirrels in the underbrush. Just me, trapped in that old machine surrounded by a wall of trees that suddenly felt wrong. I tried the key again. Click. One more time. Click. And then silence. Not failure. Not even a struggle. Just silence. Like the machine had given up, or something else had made it give up. I didn't panic, not yet. Instead, I got out and lifted the hood, convincing myself this was just mechanical, just bad luck. I'd dealt with engine trouble before. Dead starters, clogged fuel lines, vapor lock. Old RVs come with their own set of gremlins. But as I looked into the engine bay, I felt something prick at the back of my neck. There was no damage, no chewed wires, no corrosion, no reason, visible or logical, that the engine shouldn't have turned over. That's when the smell hit me. It came out of nowhere. Heavy, wet, earthy, like decaying wood soaked in stagnant water. A swamp smell, but fouler, like something had died beneath the trees and the rot had seeped into the soil. I turned around, looking for a carcass, a broken branch, anything to pin it on. But it was everywhere and nowhere. It wasn't drifting on the wind. It was the air. I slammed the hood shut and stood there for a moment, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't want to show it. Not to myself, not to whatever I felt pressing in. I grabbed my pack, loaded it with food, water, flashlight, a flare gun, and the Smith & Wesson I kept for emergencies. Never had to use it before, but the weight of it gave me something to hold on to. The plan was simple. Hike back to the main road, get help, tow the RV out. Simple. Except, when I stepped past the clearing, I realized something was off. The trail was gone. Not overgrown, not hidden. Gone. The path I'd taken in, the ruts from my tires, the broken branches, the gravel scrape where my undercarriage had caught a stump. Gone. It was like the woods had healed themselves overnight, or like they'd never been disturbed to begin with. My heart dropped. I turned back to the RV just to reorient myself. Still there, exactly where I left it, but the rest of the world had shifted. I picked a direction anyway. I had GPS on my phone, even if the signal was crap out here. At the very least, I could follow the sun east toward the road. An hour passed, maybe more. The forest didn't end. The trees grew tighter together, darker, older. It was like walking into a painting, each step muffled, each breath shallower. Then the sounds started. Not voices, not words, but mimicry. The sound of my boots in the leaves, but a half step behind me. The crack of a branch, but when I turned, nothing moved. Worse than anything was the whistle. High and distant, 2 notes, the same ones I always used when calling my old dog, a sound I hadn't used in years. It came once, then again, closer. I stopped walking. My legs refused to go another step. That whistle was mine, my memory, echoed back to me from a place I had never been. I pulled the gun from my side holster, not out of courage, but fear, raw, unprocessed fear. And then I made the worst mistake of the entire trip. I called out, "Who's there?" Silence. Then a reply, but not a voice, not even a sound, a shape. It moved between 2 trees, low to the ground, not fast, almost casual, but unmistakably there, too large for a deer, too small for a bear. Human? Maybe. But wrong. I raised the gun and shouted, "Back off, I'm armed." Stillness. Then the sound of something brushing bark, something circling. I ran. I don't even remember choosing a direction. I just ran, branches slashing my arms, pack bouncing against my spine, breath ragged and hot in my throat. I crashed through the trees like a scared animal, all thought gone. Just escape, just away. Eventually, I burst back into the clearing, half expecting the RV to be gone, replaced by a ring of stones or some ancient altar. But it was there, waiting, like it never left. And I dropped to my knees, panting, staring at it like it might vanish any second. That night, I didn't build a fire, I didn't cook, I didn't journal. I locked every door, closed every blind, and sat in the dark with my gun across my lap. The knocking came again. 1:27 a.m. 3 taps above the kitchen, then 3 at the back, then silence, and then the door handle turned. Slow, deliberate. Click, click, click. It was locked. I made damn sure of that. But whoever or whatever was out there, they wanted to see if I'd made a mistake. And I nearly screamed when I realized the RV door was chained too, and the chain was moving, being tested, pulled gently, then more, then harder. Clink, clink. I shouted, "I'm armed." It stopped. I stared at the door, waiting for the shadow, the slam, the burst of violence that would shatter whatever sanity I had left. But nothing happened, nothing at all. I didn't sleep, not even a second. When morning finally came, the chain hung loose, not broken, not twisted, just limp, like whoever had tested it had no need for force, like they were just curious or playing. And then I saw the marks on the door frame, not scratches, not pry marks, symbols, carved, thin, delicate, like they'd been etched with a bone needle. 3 of them in a vertical row, each one sharper, deeper than the last. I didn't recognize them, but they recognized me. I didn't touch the carvings. I didn't even get close. Something about them felt unfinished, like the act of seeing them was only part of whatever they were meant to do. Like I just stepped into the middle of something ancient and looking too closely would draw it even further in. I backed away, careful not to brush the door. I didn't want that wood under my fingertips, not after the night I'd had. But it wasn't over. The woods, they didn't let me leave. I tried to drive again, engine still dead. I tried to walk again, this time in a different direction, armed with a compass and every ounce of resolve I could summon, and still no path, just forest. Twisting, changing. It didn't matter which way I turned. The trees moved behind me, subtle, imperceptible shifts that I couldn't track in real time. But I felt them, like the branches leaned a little closer each time I passed, like they whispered when I wasn't looking. By the 3rd day, my food was running low. I rationed it the best I could. I had water from a nearby creek. I boiled it over a small fire during the day. I never lit anything at night. Light drew attention, and attention out here felt like an invitation. I told myself I'd wait it out. Someone would come, another camper, a ranger, even a lost hiker. But I knew the truth. Nobody was coming because I wasn't supposed to be here. Not really. Not in this part of the Ozarks. You can look at a map all you want, plan your route, drop a pin, follow your compass, but the land has rules of its own, and sometimes it folds. Sometimes it pulls you in and forgets to spit you back out. On the 5th night, the whistling returned. Same 2 notes. But this time, it came from inside the RV. I was standing just outside, stirring a pan of canned stew over the fire. The second I heard the sound, my blood ran cold. It was my whistle, inside my vehicle, and I'd left the door shut. I didn't move, just stood there staring at the RV like it had grown teeth. Then a soft thump from inside. Not loud, not aggressive, just enough to let me know I wasn't alone. I stepped closer, careful, gun in hand. The fire popped behind me. The forest hushed. I called out, "Who's in there?" No answer. Another thump, closer to the front. I grabbed the handle and flung the door open. Darkness, stillness. The curtains swayed slightly like something had brushed past them only moments before. I swept the place top to bottom, under the seats, in the cabinets, even inside the storage hatch. Nothing, no signs of entry, no signs of exit. But on the kitchenette counter, carved into the laminate with what looked like a rusted nail, was another symbol. Same style, same precision, one I hadn't seen before. 4 now, in total. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat on the roof of the RV with my back to the aluminum siding and my gun on my lap, flashlight tucked under my arm, waiting for the dawn. But the dawn never came. That morning, the sun didn't rise. The sky lightened, sure, but not in the way it should have. There was no golden hue, no warm orange crest breaking over the horizon, just a pale gray wash, like light filtered through ash. And the woods, they looked different, taller, older, wrong. It was like time had warped around me. like the place I was in had stopped obeying the rules of the world I knew. I thought about screaming, about standing on the roof and shouting until my throat bled, but something told me that was the worst thing I could do. Make noise, draw them in. No, I needed to wait. I needed to listen. That day I sat still, completely still, watching, observing, trying to understand. And for the first time, I noticed the pattern. At 1:27 a.m. every night, the knocking. Before it, always the whistle. After it, always the cymbals. It wasn't random. It was ritual, and that meant it could be broken. If I could understand the rules, maybe I could survive. Maybe I could leave. That night, I stayed inside the RV, curtains drawn, doors locked, lights off. I sat on the floor, back against the closet, gun in hand, watching the stove, the place where the knocking always began. At exactly 1:27 a.m., it came. 3 knocks, then silence. I waited. 3 more. This time at the rear. I raised the flashlight, didn't turn it on, just pointed it. Then the handle turned again. Click, click, click. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't acknowledge it. The chain clinked, tugged once, then stopped, a long pause. Then the sound of breathing. Deep. Wet. Like lungs that hadn't drawn air in years. Right on the other side of the door. I held my breath, stared at the wood, and then without warning, a single thin finger poked through the crack in the door, curling just beneath the chain. Gray, bone-thin, nails black with filth. It didn't try to open the door, it just reached, feeling, exploring, searching. I couldn't scream, I couldn't even blink. I was too far gone for panic now. This was survival. And then, just like that, it withdrew. The handle released, the night held its breath, and nothing happened. When the sun rose, a real sunrise this time, I stepped outside. The sky was clear. The birds were back. The air smelled like pine and smoke. I looked around in disbelief. The woods were different. Or maybe they were back. The RV started on the first try. I didn't ask questions. I didn't pack. I just drove. Didn't stop until I hit a real road with a painted line. Didn't stop again until I hit a diner. And I sat there for hours, drinking burnt coffee, watching other people live their lives like the world was normal. Like it had rules. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first, who would believe it? But when I got home, I found something. On the side of the RV, 4 symbols, burned into the paint, same as before, still there. I ran my fingers over them. The symbols. They weren't just painted on. They weren't drawn or etched with a knife. They were branded, as if heat had fused them into the metal. My fingertips tingled where they touched, like static clinging to my skin long after contact. I don't know how long I stood there, just tracing those scorched shapes. They weren't hot anymore. They weren't cold either. They were neutral, like they didn't belong to any temperature, like they didn't belong in this world at all. After everything I'd been through in the Ozarks, I thought maybe I'd imagined some of it. The warped sense of time, the endless trees, the finger at the door. But these symbols, they were real. They were proof. And I didn't know what they meant. I spent the next few weeks obsessively researching. I pulled out every map of the Ozarks I could find, tracing routes, looking for anything strange, dead zones, abandoned sites, places scrubbed from public databases. Nothing turned up, but I knew what I'd experienced. Then I started digging deeper. Folklore, local legends, pre-settlement myths, things not found in state tourism brochures or friendly ranger pamphlets. I found a story, an old one. Somewhere in the Ozarks, a place not marked by name, but known to a few as the Hollowing Wood, there were tales of a lost loop, a route through the forest that didn't obey the rules of space or time. People who entered often didn't come back. Those who did came back changed, marked. That word stood out. Marked. They were said to be chosen by something, not cursed, not blessed, just claimed. For what, no one agreed. Some said it was an ancient forest spirit. Others claimed it was a breach between worlds. A place where the old and the new overlapped, where the land still remembered things people had long forgotten. The stories said that the markings always appeared in 4s, 4 symbols. Once the 4th appeared, you weren't just a visitor anymore. You were watched. Maybe forever. I slammed the laptop shut. I didn't want this story to be my story. I wanted it to be a bad dream, okay, from a lonely trip gone wrong. But the deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't about me. I'd stumbled into something older than names, older than warnings, and I'd brought it back. I started having dreams, nightmares, really. The same four knocks at 1:27 a.m., the whistle, the warped, endless trees. But this time, in the dream, they were inside my house. I woke up one night to find all the cabinet doors in my kitchen open, every one of them, perfectly aligned. No sign of forced entry, just open. Another night, I heard a soft tapping on my bedroom window. Second floor, no tree nearby. I stopped sleeping. The worst was the night I woke up standing in the backyard, barefoot. No idea how I got there, just standing in the cold grass, staring up at the dark sky. In my hand was a carving knife. And in the dirt, at my feet, a fifth symbol. New, not like the others. Different. More complete. That's when I understood. Those first four, they weren't the full set. They were preparation. The fifth was the final mark. The one that meant it, whatever it was, had arrived. I left the next day, packed my RV, and got the hell out of town. I didn't have a plan, just a direction, away. But the marks didn't stay behind. No matter how far I drove, no matter how many miles I put between myself and that cursed loop in the Ozarks, I started seeing them again. Burned into trees, scrawled into rest stop bathroom walls, flickering briefly on roadside signs, then gone when I looked again. And the knock, always at 1:27, always 3 times, no more, no less. I never open the door, I never speak, but I always feel it. The thing behind the knock, waiting. And now I think I know what it wants. It's not trying to hurt me, not really. It's trying to get in, not just into the RV, not into my home, into me. The more I deny it, the more it waits, the more patient it becomes. It doesn't rush, it doesn't chase, it knows it already has me. Because when I look at myself in the mirror now, I don't just see the tired eyes, the gaunt cheeks, the man who's seen too much. I see them, the symbols, etched faintly into my skin, only visible under certain light. One behind my ear, one just beneath the ribs, another inside my palm, and the newest one burned into the back of my shoulder. I tried to scrub them off, tried bleach, tried knives. They don't fade, they don't heal. They are part of me now. And I don't think I can undo it. But I'm telling you this for a reason, because someone's going to camp out there again. Maybe you, maybe someone you love, maybe someone who thinks they're tough, experienced, too smart to get lost in the woods. I thought that too. But the Ozarks don't care. They don't play by the rules. And if you stumble into that loop, if you hear the whistle or the knock or see those symbols carved into places they shouldn't be, don't rationalize it. Don't dismiss it, because if it notices you, it's already too late. You'll think you're safe, you'll leave, you'll get back on the road and drive away, but it'll be with you. It doesn't care about time or distance or whether or not you believe in it. It follows and it waits. And when the fifth mark comes, it starts all over again. That's the part no one tells you. That once it's in, once you've been marked, it doesn't chase you like something out of a horror movie. It doesn't scream. It doesn't break down your door. It waits. It watches. It becomes you. I don't know how long I've been driving. Sometimes I forget the day, the state, the month. The seasons don't feel real anymore. I watch trees blur by through the windshield, but I couldn't tell you where they grow, what their names are. They all feel like reflections of something I saw in that forest. All of it, gas stations, trailheads, diners off the side of the highway, it feels replicated, like a world built to keep me from turning back. I've stopped using GPS, not because it's broken, but because I don't trust it anymore. I once followed it into a place that wasn't on any map. Some nowhere stretch of gravel road in Arkansas that ended in a collapsed bridge and a clearing full of scorched ground. No fire damage on the trees around it. Just a perfect circle of black, like the earth had been burned from the inside. I backed out of there so fast I nearly ripped the RV's bumper off, but I still remember the sound, that distant knocking, not on the door, not this time, from underneath. I didn't sleep for 4 nights after that. I've tried going back to normal, parking at well-lit RV parks, grilling burgers beside friendly retirees, waving at rangers like everything's okay, but I always feel it. The Ozarks are in me now, not just memories, presence, that whisper between trees, that shimmer on the edge of vision when you're sure someone's watching but no one's there. It's like I've become a walking transmitter. Others feel it too, even if they don't know what they're feeling. I stayed at a KOA in Missouri once, tried to blend in, act normal. I was doing laundry in their little cinder block room, folding a stack of shirts, when this little girl wandered in, no older than 6. She stopped mid-step, looked straight at me and whispered, "You have the forest in your eyes." Then she left. Her mom called after her, scolding her for talking to strangers. But that moment, it froze me, because it was true. I used to love camping. Love the open sky, the crackle of firewood, the isolation, the smell of pine, the thrill of setting up somewhere new every week. But now I dread dusk. I dread pulling off the road. I dread stillness, because it thrives in stillness. It presses in when the wind dies. It hums in the silence between cricket chirps. It waits in the static hum of campground generators going offline for the night. That's when it visits, and not always outside. Sometimes I hear footsteps from the back of the RV when I'm driving, just a soft creak, like someone pacing. I tell myself it's the chassis settling, a loose pan sliding, but I know better. I stopped locking the bathroom door a few weeks ago. Why? Because it knocked back. One night when I was in there brushing my teeth, trying to calm the gnawing panic that never really goes away anymore, I heard a gentle knock on the mirror. 3 times. Not loud, delicate, curious. I stared into my own reflection for a full minute, toothpaste running down my chin, waiting. Then the glass shifted, like water disturbed by a pebble. I backed out, didn't even turn the light off. That was the night I smashed every mirror in the RV, except one. The one behind the driver's seat. The one built into the rig when I bought it. No matter how many times I've covered it with a towel, duct tape, even ripped it off once, it comes back. Always back. Clean. Untouched. Like it wants to be seen. Like it's seeing me. You want to know what the worst part is? It's not the fear. It's the temptation. Sometimes I miss it. The forest. The hush. The feeling of being noticed. Like I belong to something vast and unknowable. Like I was chosen. That's what it does. It gets inside your head, makes you want it, makes you question whether you ever belong to the normal world at all. And that's when you realize the truth. The Ozarks didn't just mark me. They rewrote me. I carry it now, everywhere I go. And I think that was always the point. Not to scare me, not even to harm me, but to spread. I saw a man last week, parked 2 rigs down from me at a quiet site in Tennessee. Young guy, probably mid-30s, traveling solo. We shared a beer, made small talk. He laughed about how his GPS had rerouted him weirdly through the mountains. Thought I'd never get out, he joked, but when he smiled, I saw something in his eyes, something familiar. And when he lifted his arm to scratch the back of his neck, I saw a mark, just a faint burned-in line, curved like a crescent or a sickle, the first one. I wanted to warn him. I wanted to scream, "Leave now, don't stay another night." But I didn't, because I knew it wouldn't matter. He'd already heard the knock, maybe not on the door, maybe just in his dreams, in the whisper of a wind that doesn't match the trees. In the silence when all the bugs go still for no reason, he'd been noticed. And once you're noticed, you're never alone again. I left the next morning, didn't say goodbye, didn't even dump my tanks. I drove out of there like the road was burning behind me. But I kept thinking about him, that young guy, his grin, his easy laugh. I wonder how long it'll take before he stops laughing, before he starts seeing, and then, eventually, before he becomes like me. I didn't grow up thinking the world was kind, but I believed it had rules. Believed that if you stayed alert, stayed honest, kept your eyes on the road and your gear packed tight, you could make it through just about anything. But the Ozarks, they don't care about your rules. They write their own. And the longer I live with this thing inside me, the more I start to suspect maybe the Ozarks aren't a place at all. Not entirely. Maybe it's something else, a presence, a net beneath reality, a feeling made real, because I've seen it happen to others. It's never dramatic. It's quiet. It starts with a glance, a slip of time, a skipped breath, that moment when your ears pop and you feel like you're not alone, but there's nothing there to prove it. Then you start losing things. I don't mean losing your wallet or forgetting where you put the lighter. I mean losing pieces of yourself. I used to keep journals of every stop, every campground, every mile logged, every trail hiked, a full logbook front to back, bound in leather. I found it the other day, buried behind my toolkit under the rear bed. Every page was blank, not torn, not water damaged, just like it had never been written in. I flipped through it with shaking hands, trying to breathe, trying to stay calm, trying not to notice how my fingers were trembling in that way they do only when it's near. And on the very last page, at the bottom right corner, a single line, burned in, not inked. We always bring them back. I threw the book out the window, but 2 days later I found it again, tucked under my pillow. That was the first night I truly broke down. I sat in the front seat of the RV, key in the ignition, the windows fogged from my breath, and cried like a child. Full body sobs, guttural, humiliating, because I realized something I hadn't let myself think until then. I was never going home. Not really. Not in the way I imagined. Not as the person I was when I entered those woods. Not as the man who believed in maps and checklists and trip itineraries. Because this thing, this force, this presence, it doesn't just follow you. It rewrites your destination. I once tried going back to my old town, the one I grew up in, nestled in Oklahoma, flat land and long roads. I thought maybe if I got far enough away, if I stood on the porch of the house I was raised in, I'd find something solid to hold on to again. But when I pulled up to where it should have been, it wasn't there. Not just the house, the entire street. Gone. In its place was a dense wall of trees, not the kind that grow out slowly over years. These were old, gnarled, roots like knuckles, bark so dark it absorbed light. I walked up to where the front door used to be. I remembered the cracked sidewalk, the little red wagon half buried in the yard from when we were kids. Now, only pine needles, and that smell, damp soil, ozone, that sharp metallic edge that hits right before a lightning strike. I backed away. I got in the RV and drove all night, didn't stop until I hit Kansas. When I woke the next morning in a truck stop parking lot, the first thing I noticed wasn't the sky or the diesel fumes or the birds. It was the mud on my tires. Red clay, Ozark clay. I hadn't even driven through Arkansas. But it doesn't matter, because you don't need to be in the Ozarks for the Ozarks to be in you. And the deeper it gets, the more it makes room. There are times now when I look in the mirror, not the cursed one, the little hand mirror I keep in a drawer, and I don't recognize myself. My eyes are mine, but there's something underneath, like another set of eyes behind them that's watching through me, judging, waiting, and I dream now. I never used to dream much, but now every night it's the same sequence. I'm standing in the forest clearing, naked, covered in dirt, surrounded by others, dozens of people, all silent, all motionless. They have no faces, just blank, smooth skin where mouths and eyes and noses should be. And in the center of them all, a single tree, tall, blackened, leafless, bark that bleeds when I touch it. It hums, not a sound, a vibration, low, intimate. And every time I reach for it just before I touch it, I wake up, sweating, shaking, bleeding from the cuticle of my left thumb. Always the left, always the same cut. I started taping it up before I went to sleep, thinking maybe I was scratching myself in my sleep. But every morning, fresh blood, same angle, same depth, as if I was offering something. And lately, I've been wondering, what if the dreams aren't dreams at all? What if I'm being called back? Or worse, what if I never left? I keep driving, state to state, mile after mile, tank after tank, but it doesn't fade. The hum in the night, the knocking under the chassis, the flickers of motion in the rear view that disappear the moment I turn. The Ozarks are everywhere now. Or maybe, just maybe, they were always everywhere, and I only learned to see them. Sometimes on clear nights, I pull over and shut off all the lights, just sit in the dark, windows open, listening. And in those moments, I feel peace, not safety, not comfort, but peace, because the thing inside me stops fighting. And for just a few breaths, I feel like I belong again. I've come to believe that the worst kind of horror isn't the sudden scream or the dark silhouette on the trail or even the handprint that shows up on the inside of the window. No, the worst kind is the horror that waits. The kind that doesn't need to chase you because it knows you'll turn around eventually, knows you'll come back, and maybe that's what the Ozarks are, deep down. A place you can leave but never truly escape. A hunger that learns your name and waits for you to whisper it again. And I think I've whispered it in ways I didn't mean to. Every time I doubted myself. Every time I told someone it's nothing, even though I knew it wasn't. Every time I ignored the gut instinct to run. That's how it gets in. Not through blood or scratches or haunted trees. Through denial. Through silence. Through you. I started noticing other people, other campers who looked like they'd been touched too. Not obviously, not like me. But you see it if you look close. In the way they park their rigs at strange angles, wheels just over the line, how they don't speak when you pass by, just glance once sharply and look away. Like they're scared of being recognized, like they're worried I'll see it in them too. One guy I met, Barry, I think his name was, told me he used to be an over-the-road trucker, crisscrossed the country for decades, said he'd seen everything, tornadoes, wildfires, wrecks that didn't make the news. But the worst thing he ever saw was something standing in the middle of the road one night in Missouri. He said it wasn't an animal. It wasn't a person. It had the shape of a person, but it was wrong. Too smooth, like something trying to imitate a man but forgetting the finer details. Its arms didn't swing when it moved, its eyes didn't blink, and when it turned to look at him, it smiled. Not a grin, not a snarl, a smile like it knew him, like it'd been waiting for him since the day he was born. He drove straight through it, closed his eyes, gunned the engine, and kept going. But when he checked his rearview mirror, there was nothing there. No body, no blood, not even a dent, just miles of empty road. I asked him what he thought it was. He didn't answer. He just looked off toward the tree line and whispered, "I think we bring pieces of it with us." We haven't spoken since, but I've been thinking about what he said, a lot, because I've started hearing it too. Not out loud, not at first. It started as a feeling, a sense that my name had weight, that someone or something was holding it, and then the dreams changed. Now I hear a voice whispering it from behind that black tree, soft, intimate, like it's been following me my whole life and has finally gathered the courage to speak. You've always belonged here, Nathan. That's my name. I haven't told anyone that in over a year, but it knew. I try not to think about how many others it knows. I've started going to smaller and smaller campgrounds, avoiding people entirely. But even then, I'll find evidence that someone's been there. Boot prints around the fire pit. Char marks on trees that haven't been burned. Small piles of feathers arranged in spirals like offerings. And sometimes notes, not taped, not pinned, just slipped under my wiper blade or tucked inside the gas cap. All handwritten, no return names, always the same message. You shouldn't have left. Sometimes I wonder if I even did. If I ever really got out of that first clearing. What if everything after was just the long dream of a man buried in red dirt? What if this is the afterlife? What if it isn't a place you go when you die, but a place you wake up to when you finally stop pretending you're alive? The only way I hold on is by reminding myself of one night. The night we escaped the loop trail, the one with Jamie. I remember her hand in mine, how tightly she gripped it when the fog started to clear, how we ran together, fell together, cried together when we found the RV still parked just off that gravel lot. The engine was warm, as if someone had just turned it off. We never asked questions about that, just climbed in and drove. I dropped her off at her place the next day. We didn't speak much. We couldn't. Everything that needed to be said was written on our faces. I haven't seen her since, but I think about her constantly. Not because I miss her, though I do, but because she's the only anchor I have to prove that what happened was real. That I'm not just some drifter cracking under the weight of loneliness and miles. She was there. We both were. And if we were both there, then maybe this thing can be escaped, or at least resisted. So that's why I'm telling you this now. Not to scare you, not even to warn you, but to remind you. When you're out there in your RV, soaking in the quiet, enjoying the stars, when the wind shifts just a little too suddenly, and the trees start to lean toward you instead of away, when you hear a sound behind you and turn to find nothing, but still feel like something is watching, you need to remember this. The Ozarks aren't just mountains. They're a mirror. And if you stay too long, they show you what you really are. I used to think horror was something that happened to you. A freak event, a cursed place. A moment where the world slipped sideways just long enough to scar you and then return to normal, leaving you behind. But now I know better. True horror, it doesn't arrive in a scream. It doesn't knock. It seeps. It's the silence between your footsteps in an unfamiliar campground. It's the fog curling around your RV like fingers you swear weren't there a moment ago. It's the feeling of being watched when you know for a fact you're alone. And worst of all, it's the slow realization that maybe you're not supposed to make it home. Not because of some monster lurking in the woods, but because part of you doesn't want to. Part of you misses the way the Ozarks made you feel. Terrified, yes, but aware. Because back in civilization, it's easy to sleepwalk through life. Easy to get numbed by noise, drowned in obligation. But out there, out in the mountains with only your headlights and your instincts, you feel everything, every breath, every decision, every regret. It strips you down until all you have left is who you really are. And if you don't like what you see, the forest will offer you another version, something darker, something easier to live with for a while. That's the trap. Not just the strange people, not just the impossible paths or the sounds you can't explain. It's the promise that you can stay out there and finally become something you were never allowed to be. Something that doesn't need light to see. I remember the last time I set up camp near a lake off one of those winding Ozark trails. I parked the RV between two huge sycamores right by the shoreline, no one around for miles. At first, it felt peaceful until I looked in the water. The lake was still, a perfect mirror, and in it I saw myself, but it wasn't the version I knew. It was gaunt, hollow-eyed, standing just a little too still, and it smiled. That same knowing, patient smile. I didn't move, didn't breathe, and the reflection didn't either, until I blinked just once, and the face in the water didn't. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't even go back in the RV. I just sat by the fire and listened to the woods press in. I knew if I went to sleep, I'd wake up as something else. Maybe not physically, but something inside me would have snapped. And maybe that's what finally saved me. I didn't run. I didn't fight. I just refused. Refused to give in to the part of me that wanted to disappear into that forest. Refused to answer when it called my name. Refused to become what it wanted me to be. And when the sun finally broke over the ridgeline, I felt it. The Ozarks let go. Not completely, but just enough. And I think that's what it wants you to learn. Not how to beat it, not how to outsmart it, but how to remember yourself in a place that tries to take that away. So this is for the ones still out there, the ones in their rigs, watching the sky turn red over the treetops, the ones who hear a knock on their RV door at 3 a.m. and know in their bones it's not the wind. The ones who've seen something on a trail and told themselves it was a trick of the light, even though they haven't slept right since. This story is for you. You're not alone, and you're not crazy. You're just one of the few who've looked deep into the woods and heard it whisper back. The question is, did you listen, or did you belong to it already? I don't know how many more times I'll head out there. Part of me feels like every time I go back, I'm taking a risk I don't fully understand. But another part, the part that won't let me rest, knows I'm not done yet. Because some people run from the dark and others, they walk back into it. Not because they want to, but because they know someone else will, and someone has to be waiting on the other side to remind them who they are, to remind them how to come back. So if you're planning a trip through the Ozarks, if you're drawn by the beauty, the silence, the wild promise of the land, go. But remember this, take your precautions, trust your instincts, and if the forest offers you a version of yourself you don't recognize, don't take it, no matter how good it feels, because not everything in those mountains wants to kill you. Some things just want you to stay forever. I didn't set out to scare myself. The Appalachian Trail had always been a dream, something mythic, romantic. I'd read the books, I'd watched the documentaries, and somewhere between losing my job and watching my relationship collapse like wet paper, I told myself it was time. Time to get away, to move, to feel like I still had a body. So I packed my life into a rucksack, left the apartment behind, and set foot on the trail just north of Springer Mountain. That was in April. By the time I reached the North Carolina border, the trail had already changed me. Stripped me down, maybe. I'd started alone, like a lot of people do, telling myself it was about independence, about solitude. But I hadn't understood what solitude meant. Not really. Not until I'd gone 4 days without seeing another human face, and even the rustle of wind through dead leaves started sounding like someone whispering behind my back. This story isn't just mine. Not exactly. The trail holds things, stories, residue. Hikers trade them like talismans at shelters and trailheads, around smoky campfires or quiet water stops. Not always in full sentences, and never with the sort of structure you'd expect from ghost stories. They bleed out in fragments, a glance, a warning, a silence that feels heavier than anything spoken. I collected them like I collected blisters. I didn't realize how many I had until I couldn't sleep anymore. The first one came from a guy I met just past Klingman's Dome. His name was Rick, retired, early 60s, lean like a crowbar, and sharp in the eyes. We shared a shelter for the night, both of us coming off a long, rain-soaked day. Our clothes steamed on the line, and I remember the silence pressing in once the sun dropped. No frogs, no crickets, just that muffled stillness that makes you wonder if you've gone deaf. Rick sat staring into the dark like it was a TV set. After a while, he said, "You ever see eyes out there? Not animal ones, higher, wide apart." I shook my head, laughed it off. "You mean like Bigfoot?" He didn't laugh. "Not Bigfoot. Taller than that," he told me, and I remember his voice getting low, almost embarrassed, that 2 nights before he'd camped solo off a Blue Blaze trail. Usual stuff. Found a flat spot, hung his bear bag, set up camp. Woke up to footsteps, crunching slow through the brush. He thought it was a bear, grabbed his headlamp, shined it out into the dark, and saw eyes. Pale green, reflecting high. But what stuck with him wasn't the height. It was that the thing didn't move. Didn't blink. Just watched. Then it whistled at him. Rick swore he didn't sleep again that night. Said when he woke up in the morning, his bear bag had been untied. Not clawed, not bitten, but untied. Carefully, like fingers had done it. I told myself he was just a lonely guy trying to mess with the new kid, but I didn't sleep easy that night either. You start to notice patterns out here. The same kinds of stories cropping up hundreds of miles apart. Voices that don't match the terrain. Campsites that feel wrong the second you step into them. And the feeling, the gut-level animal feeling, that something's watching you from just beyond the light. One story that stuck with me came from a woman I met outside Hot Springs. Her trail name was Silver. She'd done the AT 3 times already and didn't talk unless she had to. But one evening, she opened up. We'd stopped at a riverside spot. The trees there bent a little wrong, leaning together at the top like they were conspiring. I didn't like it, but Silver had already unpacked and started boiling water, so I stayed. She looked up at me mid-meal and said, "This place eats people." I asked her what she meant. She told me about a guy she'd hiked with for a week, years ago. Young, eager, quiet, the kind who carries too much weight because they think gear will protect them from everything. They'd camped together near a ravine just off trail, flat ground, good water, clear skies, perfect. But in the middle of the night, she woke up and realized his tent was gone. No sounds, no screams, just gone. She searched for hours, then hiked to the next shelter and left word. SAR teams looked, apparently. Nothing. No trace. The spot didn't even show signs of struggle. And it wasn't the first time. Locals, she said, had their own names for places like that. The quiet holes where the earth swallows sound. I told myself I didn't believe her, but when I lay down that night, I couldn't stop staring at the black hole between the trees. The worst story I ever heard didn't come from a hiker. It came from a caretaker. This was in Shenandoah, where the trail intersects with some park roads and you get occasional contact with rangers or maintenance staff. I was limping bad from a twisted ankle and stopped at a wayside to rest. The caretaker, an older woman named Judith, saw me icing it and sat down beside me with a peanut butter bar. She asked if I'd ever camped alone on the ridge trails, off the beaten path. I said once or twice. She looked at me, really looked, and said, "Do you ever hear people walking at night but they never show up?" That got my attention. I nodded. She told me the trail had ghosts, sure. Everyone says that. But some of them weren't dead people. Some were alive when they disappeared. She'd found a campsite once, abandoned, nothing too strange, except the tent flap was open, food still inside, boots neatly placed. But the fire was still warm, and the log where someone had been sitting was wet with sweat. Like whoever'd been there had just stood up and walked away, into the woods. The rangers chalked it up to a hiker getting lost. But Judith went back the next day and found the same scene again. Different gear, same setup. Like someone else had come, camped, and vanished the same way. She stopped walking that ridge after that. Wouldn't even drive near it. I asked her where it was, but she just shook her head. You'll know if you get close. You'll feel it, like something's leaning over you. And she was right, I did. But that part came later. I first felt it somewhere near Buena Vista. That stretch of the trail runs quiet and clean, soft underfoot, the canopy high and gently broken with light. It's the kind of place where you'd expect peace, maybe even healing. But there was something under the stillness. I don't know how to describe it in a way that makes sense. It wasn't a noise, exactly. It was more like the absence of one. Birds didn't sing. Bugs didn't hum. The wind didn't even stir the branches. I only noticed when I stopped for water. It was just past noon, sun high but filtered through green leaves, and I bent over to fill my bottle from a spring. And then I realized the forest had gone silent. Utterly. Not the soft, serene silence of isolation, but something wrong. Muffled. Like the woods were holding their breath. I stood there listening. Then I heard a footstep. Just one. Dry leaves, light crunch, maybe 20 yards off trail. I turned fast, adrenaline already hitting, heart cracking against my ribs, but there was no one. No flash of movement, no swaying brush. Just that same thick quiet, like the woods were waiting. I backed away from the spring slowly, didn't even screw the cap on my bottle until I was back on the trail. Then I walked. Fast, until the air felt like it belonged to the earth again. I didn't sleep that night. I picked a ridge with good visibility, set up my bivvy where nothing could approach without snapping twigs or breaking brush. But even then, I couldn't stop scanning the dark. Every creak, every branch sighing in the wind made me flinch. And at 2:43 a.m., I heard it again, a single footstep. Dry, slow, just beyond the range of my headlamp. I never saw anything. But I didn't sleep, and by morning I was already hiking before the dew dried. A week later, I met someone who'd felt the same thing, only worse. His name was Connor. Young guy, maybe 25, beard thick with trail grime, eyes too wide for someone who'd been alone less than a month. We crossed paths near a lean-to and ended up sharing it that night. I asked him halfway through dinner if he'd ever felt watched. He didn't answer right away, just stared into the corner of the shelter like he expected something to come crawling out. Then he nodded. Started a few nights ago. He told me he'd been solo camping, had gone about 6 days without seeing another hiker. Around day 3, he noticed small things were missing. Nothing major, a sock, a lighter, a plastic spork, but they were items he knew he'd packed. Then his tent got moved. He woke up in the middle of the night, disoriented, and realized the trees around him were wrong. The branches he'd looked up at before falling asleep weren't the same, and his fire ring was gone, like the whole site had shifted. He hiked fast the next day, told himself he was imagining it, but that night he laid down and snapped a picture of the trees directly above him, just in case. When he woke up, he swears, they were different. Not the same branches, not the same sky. I don't think I'm staying in the same place, he said. I think something's moving me. He showed me the pictures. I couldn't be sure. Angles changed, the brain plays tricks, but I didn't sleep again that night either. By the time I reached Harper's Ferry, I was tired in a way that had nothing to do with my legs. I'd been on the trail for nearly 2 months. My body had adjusted, but my mind hadn't. I felt thinned out, like the forest had worn me down to something smaller, lighter, more permeable. That was when I met Marcy. She worked at the visitor center, hiker box volunteer, middle-aged, the sort of kind voice that reminds you the world still has soft corners. We got to talking, and I told her I was planning to stealth camp a few nights north of there, off-trail near a stream I'd seen on the map. Her face changed instantly, tightened. "Don't camp near water up there," she said, "at least not alone." I asked why. She paused, then said carefully, "There's a story, an old one. Locals don't talk about it much, but hikers, sometimes they come through and say the same thing, about a stream that doesn't reflect right." That caught me off guard. "Doesn't reflect?" She nodded. "It runs uphill, looks fine from a distance, but if you kneel beside it and look in, your reflection doesn't follow. Sometimes it's slower. Sometimes it's missing. Sometimes it's not you." I laughed. I thought she was messing with me. She didn't laugh back. "They say it shows the you that stayed in the woods," she said, "the version that never left." That night I stayed in town, slept indoors. For the first time in weeks, I didn't dream. But I couldn't get the idea out of my head. A stream that remembers you differently. A forest that wears you down until something else gets in. That idea of leaving pieces of yourself behind, it stuck to me harder than anything else. Because it didn't feel like folklore. It felt like something I was already starting to understand. A few days north of Harper's Ferry, the trail narrowed again, sloped inward like it was folding into itself, hedged by mountain laurel and rhododendrons so thick they scraped your shoulders as you passed. I hiked in silence, headphones off, no music, just the sound of breath and boot. And then the sound of breath that wasn't mine. It matched my pace. Inhale when I inhaled, exhale with a fractional delay. I froze. Listened. Nothing. But when I moved again, it started up too. I spun around fast, just dirt, leaves, and trees behind me. Nobody. I tried to explain it away. Echo. Imagination. Something logical. But as I picked my way over the rocks and roots ahead, a deeper part of me, a quieter, older part, started to panic. There's a difference between being alone and being watched. I felt the latter, like something was measuring me. I kept moving faster now until the trail dumped me into a clearing. The canopy broke, the sun poured in, and the sense of being followed evaporated like steam. I tried to laugh it off, but it clung to me like a cobweb across the back of my neck. That night I made camp earlier than usual, near a high ridgeline where the wind never stopped moving and nothing could sneak up without warning. I sat by my fire for hours, pretending I was fine, listening for that breath behind mine. It never came, but sometime after midnight I woke up to a low humming sound. Not like insects, not even like a human voice. It was musical, rhythmic, coming from the trees behind my tent. I unzipped the flap slowly, careful not to make a sound, and peered out into the dark. Nothing. But the humming got louder. I stepped out barefoot onto the cold ground, flashlight in one hand, knife in the other. The sound was shifting now. Not just a hum, but almost like singing. like a lullaby without words. No distinct pitch, just that same swaying cadence. It was close. And I didn't want to know what was making it. I should have turned back into my tent. I should have packed up and left right then. But something about the song drew me in. It was like it knew my name, like it used to be mine. I don't remember how far I walked, but I came to another campsite, small, ringed with stone, fresh fire remnants, a pack against a tree. No people. I called out once. No answer. Then I saw the tent. It was crushed, like someone had taken a boulder to it. Poles snapped, nylon shredded, but no blood, no signs of struggle, just ruin and quiet. And that song, gone now. I backed away slowly and didn't stop walking until I was back at my own site. I broke camp in the dark and kept moving until morning. I never saw another soul that day. When I finally did, an older woman in her 60s, trail named Feather, I practically begged to hike alongside her, told her it wasn't safe to be out here alone. She didn't argue. Feather was sharp, experienced, had done the trail 3 times already, but even she admitted something was off that year. Less wildlife, she said. Birdsong's not right. I wake up in the middle of the night and can't hear a damn thing. She asked if I'd ever heard the other stories, the old ones. I nodded. You mean the thing about the stream? She raised an eyebrow. No, I mean the ones about the third tent, I frowned. What? Back in '98, she said, a group of hikers went missing. 3 friends. Only one was ever found. She claimed they made camp near Klingman's Dome. Perfect night, clear weather, but when she woke up the next morning, there were 3 tents, not 2. The third was zipped shut from the inside. I asked what was in it. She shook her head. Nobody knows. She never went in, just packed her gear and ran 10 miles downhill without stopping. That night, Feather and I camped side by side. We didn't talk much after dark, just shared a quiet dinner, watched the fire dwindle, and tried not to admit how scared we were. I woke around 3 a.m. There was another tent. I swear to God, it hadn't been there when we went to sleep. It sat maybe 30 feet from ours, just past the fire ring. Low to the ground. Cheap, like something bought at a gas station. It hadn't been pitched well. The stakes were loose. The corners flapped a little in the breeze, but it was zipped up from the inside. I whispered to Feather. She saw it too. We didn't move, didn't speak, just watched it in silence, holding our breath for what felt like hours. Then, slowly, the zipper began to slide. Not down, but up, like someone or something inside had changed their mind about coming out. Feather grabbed my wrist. Her grip was tight. I don't think she realized how hard she was holding me. We backed away together. Didn't break line of sight, didn't blink. But the zipper just stopped, half open, hanging there, empty. Nothing emerged. When morning came, the tent was gone. No prints, no scraps, no drag marks, just flattened grass and the smell of something sour, like meat gone bad. We parted ways later that day. Feather was heading to a shuttle stop, said she'd had enough for now. I kept going. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I could out-hike whatever was following me, or maybe I was hoping to find the version of myself that hadn't changed yet. Somewhere near the North Carolina-Tennessee border, I met a guy who went by Shep, mid-30s, ex-Marine, the kind of hiker who could move 20 miles before lunch and still have time to fix someone's broken pack frame. He had this calm energy, like nothing out here could touch him. Like nothing out here could touch him. We shared a fire one night after a brutal climb. I remember watching his hands while he carved something into a piece of driftwood. Clean, deliberate cuts. I asked him what it was. He said, protection. Didn't elaborate. That night, just before sleep, I heard him whisper something into the fire, a phrase I didn't recognize. Rhythmic, but guttural. Not a prayer. It had weight. We didn't talk much after that. Just hiked a few days together in mutual silence, occasionally sharing food, keeping pace. But when we passed one particular stretch of forest just east of the Rhone Highlands, he slowed to a stop. He looked off-trail, down a slope tangled with underbrush and black branches. Then he said, almost too soft to hear, it's still here. I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer. He just picked up a small rock from the trail, turned it in his fingers, then tucked it into my pack without asking. Keep that on you, he said. Don't throw it. Don't lose it. Not here. Then he veered off trail and was gone. I didn't see him again. I should have left then too. But instead I camped not far from where he disappeared. I was tired. My knees were shot. And part of me didn't believe anything was actually wrong. But the forest didn't sleep that night. It watched. I could feel it, all around me. The trees weren't trees anymore. They leaned too close. Their branches brushed the tent like hands, not in the wind, but deliberately, in a rhythm that had no breeze behind it. Sometime after midnight, I heard the sound of something sniffing. It wasn't close, maybe 20 feet out, but it was slow and deep, like a dog working its way towards scent. Then came the click of bone or wood, knocking lightly together. And then laughter. Not loud, not childish, just a soft exhale that had the shape of amusement, but no joy behind it. I buried my mouth in my sleeping bag to stifle my breath. My heart thudded hard enough I was sure it'd be heard, and the entire time, I gripped that small rock Shep had slipped into my pack. Whatever was out there didn't leave for hours. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. By morning, my tent was covered in thin scratches, too high for a raccoon, too inconsistent for tree fall. Like something had drawn long nails along the fabric just to listen to how I'd react. And the forest? Dead silent. No birds, no bugs, not even the wind. It was like the trail had paused itself just to wait for my next move. I got up and walked. Fast. Didn't eat. Didn't stop to filter water. I just moved until the landscape changed, until the soil beneath my feet shifted color, until the smell of decay gave way to pine. Eventually I caught up with another group, 3 hikers from Oregon. Young, optimistic, laughing too loud, but I clung to them like a lifeline. I needed the noise. I needed proof the trail was still real. We all camped together that night in an established site near a river. Gravel base, bare cables, logs to sit on. Safe. We passed around a bottle of bourbon someone had packed, told stories, laughed. Then, one of them, a girl named Rena, asked if any of us had heard the Whisper Creek tale. I felt my spine lock up before she even finished the question. It's just an old trail legend, she said, swaying a little from the booze. Some hikers say there's this one stream, tiny, barely more than a trickle, but if you sit next to it long enough, it starts whispering your name. The other 2 laughed. She grinned. Not scary, right? Except the thing is, it doesn't use your trail name. It says the one no one out here knows, the name your mother whispered when you were sick, the name someone you lost used the last time they saw you. She looked right at me. And if you answer, you never come back. The others chuckled again, called it dumb, drunk talk, ghost stories. But I didn't laugh, because back near Harper's Ferry just once, I had heard my name spoken. My real one, the one no one out here knew. Drawn out across running water, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. I didn't answer it, but I heard it. That night I slept with the rock Shep gave me in my hand, clenched so tight my knuckles ached. And sometime before dawn, I heard something moving in the brush behind our tents. One of the other hikers stirred too. I heard his sleeping pad rustle. Then a whisper. Rena. Not shouted. Not muttered. Just slipped under the flap of her tent like a secret meant for her alone. She sat up. I saw her silhouette in the moonlight. Paused. Listening. Then she unzipped her tent slowly and stepped outside. I sat frozen. I wanted to call out. Wanted to stop her, but the name had sounded like someone she loved. I could hear it in the way she tilted her head, the way her knees trembled. Whoever or whatever had said it had known her. She vanished into the woods before I could make a sound. We searched for her all morning. Nothing. Not a broken branch, not a boot print, not a sound. It was like the trees had swallowed her whole. Rena's name never made it to the trail logs again. No one else mentioned her after a week, as if forgetting her was easier than facing what might have happened. One of her friends assumed she'd gotten off trail, maybe to meet someone. The other guy was quieter. He kept glancing at the woods during breaks, flinching when the wind moved wrong. He left the trail entirely at Damascus. I kept moving. I didn't want to. But I couldn't stay still. The forest had started to feel like water. If you stopped swimming, you'd sink. Somewhere past Grayson Highlands, I started hearing the bells, just soft ones, like cowbells far off in the fog. I figured it was cattle at first. The park was full of wild ponies, and a few ranchers let their stock graze close to the trail. But I never saw any animals, only the sound. It was always right on the edge of where my headlamp ended. I'd stop walking. The bells would stop. I'd move again. There they were, quiet, slow, like something was pacing me at a distance. I told myself it was just another hiker. That night, I made camp at a designated site tucked under a dense canopy of poplar and fir. It should have been peaceful, safe. But as the sky went black, I noticed the temperature dropped. Hard. My breath fogged. My fingertips numbed, even in gloves. I checked my phone's barometer app. It was 39 degrees. Way too cold for late spring at that elevation. The moment I turned off my headlamp and lay down, the bells started again. Closer now. Right at the tree line. Clink, 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 each one deliberate, each one surrounded by silence. Then came the scrape, metal on bark, like someone dragging a bell along a tree trunk. I didn't move. The sound circled me. Once, twice. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of something kneeling right outside the tent. A slow press of weight into earth, then the soft, grainy inhale of a nose sniffing at the nylon wall. I nearly cried out. But I stayed still, clutching the rock Shep had given me in both hands, trying not to breathe. Then, clear as day, a voice whispered, "Wrong tent." It laughed, not loud, not manic, just soft, amused, as if it had peeked behind the wrong curtain at a play and found its mistake hilarious. I didn't sleep. At first light, I broke camp and moved. Fast. I didn't even eat. By noon, I passed a southbound hiker, an older guy with a grizzled beard and a cast on one arm. He stopped me, looked at my face, said, "You hear the bells?" I nodded. He sighed and motioned toward his cast. Didn't listen the first time. Climbed a ridge I shouldn't have. Saw something I shouldn't have seen. "What was it?" I asked. He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. You'll never forget the sound." Then he pulled something from his pocket and handed it to me. Another small rock wrapped in a red thread. "Double it up," he said, "especially through the balds." I looked down the trail toward where the path climbed into the open grassy hills of the southern Appalachians. No cover, no shelter, just exposure. But I didn't have a choice. The trail only went forward. That night, I cowboy camped under the stars near Mac's Patch. No tent, just my pad, my bag, and the 2 stones beside my head. It should have been peaceful, but just past midnight, I woke to the smell of burning pine. Not a campfire, not smoke in the wind. It was acrid, right on me. And then I noticed the stars above me had been blocked. Something stood over my bag. I couldn't see it, only the outline where the stars should have been. A tall, narrow shape, angular, didn't move. It just stood as if waiting for me to do something first. I didn't. Not for hours. Eventually, it drifted back into the trees and the scent of burning faded. But the grass where it had stood, blackened. Charred. I hiked until I bled the next day. Barely stopped for water. I needed to get away from that place, from whatever I'd let follow me this far. That night, I reached Hot Springs, a small town, warm food, real beds. For the first time in weeks, I slept indoors. When I woke up, one of the rocks was missing, the one wrapped in red thread. I tore the room apart, checked the window locks, the door, my pack. It was gone. I stayed an extra day. Thought about quitting. The trail had turned into something else. Not a path, but a test. Something that stripped you down piece by piece until you either became part of it or vanished into it. In the end, I didn't quit. I kept going. But I didn't sleep outside for the rest of North Carolina, and I never walked the ridgelines without gloves over both hands and salt in my shoes. Somewhere past Klingman's Dome, I saw a carving in a tree. Deep. Fresh. One word, return. The bark around it had peeled back like it was trying to heal or close around the message, but it was still visible. I don't know what it meant, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. The Smokies faded behind me, but the silence stayed. Silence on the trail isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it hums, presses in like a held breath. You notice the lack of things. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. Just your own boots crunching, your own breath fogging. That kind of silence waited for me just past the Nantahala. There was an unlisted shelter there, not on Guthook, not in any of the printed guides. Locals called it the Half-Sleep Hollow, a lean-to with a collapsed roof, tucked half a mile off the trail behind an unmarked split. I should have passed it by. But the rain came fast that afternoon, and I didn't want to risk hypothermia. Even a crumbling roof was better than none. It was already dusk when I found it. The structure was low, half buried in moss and leaves. It looked older than the trail itself, like it had been built before the AT even had blazes. The stone base was intact, but the beams above had twisted inward like hands clasped in prayer. Inside was just enough room to lie down. No one else was there, but someone had been, recently. There were carvings on the stone wall, fresh. Symbols that didn't look like anything I recognized, spirals, X's, what looked like eyes with too many lashes. In the corner, someone had left a rusted tin cup and a folded tarp. The tarp was dry. I almost said thank you out loud. Some part of me needed to, but I didn't. I laid down with the stones tucked into the corner of my sleeping bag, just like always. The moment I closed my eyes, I dreamed. Not like normal dreams. This one started before I was asleep. I could feel it coming, like something brushing my skin from the inside out. In the dream, I was in the shelter, same position. Only I wasn't alone. There were figures lying beside me. They weren't visible. Not directly. I could see their impressions in the collapsed leaves, feel the pressure of their breath, one curled against my back, another perched near my feet, hunched like a bird watcher, waiting for the right moment. The third was above me, its face just inches from mine. Not touching, but I could feel its breath against my cheek, dry, wheezing, like it hadn't inhaled in years. I didn't open my eyes. Even in the dream, I knew not to. It whispered, "It's your turn." I woke with blood on my tongue, not mine. Something had bitten me, deep enough to bleed, but there were no marks on my lip or gums. I sat up fast, nearly screamed. The carvings on the wall were glowing, faint, red like embers dying under ash. The rusted cup was gone, and there were handprints, tiny ones, in the mud by my sleeping bag, dozens of them. Like a crowd of children had crawled in and watched me sleep. I ran, didn't even pack up, just grabbed my shoes, my pack, and bolted through the trees in the pitch dark. I didn't stop for miles. Eventually, I collapsed on the trail, gasping, too dizzy to keep moving. When morning came, I went back. I had to. My wallet, my headlamp, my stove, all left behind. The shelter wasn't there. I searched for hours. Nothing. No path, no clearing, no sign anything had ever been built there. I left a cairn, just a small stack of stones. Part of me hoped someone else would see it. Part of me prayed no one ever would. After that, I didn't take blue blazes anymore. No side trails, no shortcuts. Not even to filtered water. If it wasn't marked on the map, I didn't step foot near it. The trail got lonelier after that. Not physically. I still passed day hikers, section hikers, the occasional triple crowner coasting along like they'd made a deal with something older than time. But emotionally, I was unraveling. I started talking to myself, not in a jokey, self-aware way. I'd argue with myself, plead with the trees, whisper apologies to shadows I passed too close to. One night near the Georgia border, I met a woman hiking alone. Her trail name was Thimble. She had eyes like an old photo, washed out but still holding some of the original color. We shared a fire, swapped stories. When I told her about the shelter, she didn't flinch. She just said, "I had a dream like that in Maine." But mine said, "We've waited long enough." Then she leaned in, real quiet, and said, "Did it mark you?" I hesitated, showed her the scar on my ankle, a thin line I'd noticed weeks ago that hadn't healed. Looked like a stitch. She nodded. "You'll finish the trail, but you won't go home." "What does that mean?" I asked. Thimble just looked up at the stars, then whispered, "Some parts of the trail walk back with you." She left before dawn. I never saw her again. But I've thought about what she said almost every day since. The last 100 miles stretched like a frayed cord, each step taut with anticipation and dread. I could feel the end approaching, but it didn't feel like relief. It felt like standing at the edge of a drop, waiting to see if something would push me. I passed through familiar spots with a strange sense of unreality. Blood Mountain, Neal's Gap, Springer just on the horizon. The final approach should have been celebratory. I should have felt accomplished, but instead, I felt hunted. Not by a person, not by an animal, by the trail itself. It had burrowed into me, not just my skin, not just my memory, but deeper. Into that place you don't touch when you're home and clean and full. I saw things in the woods now. Not shapes, not ghosts, just movement. Flickers of motion in the corners of my vision. Places the wind bent wrong. Trees that seemed closer the second time I looked. And at night, when I lay still, I would hear the whisper again. It's your turn. Not every night, just enough to make me afraid of sleep. The dreams returned near Hawk Mountain. I hadn't dreamed in weeks, but this one was vivid, more than vivid. It felt like memory. I was standing in that first shelter again, the one back in Virginia where I met Nate. Only this time it was empty, completely empty. Not just of people, of time. There was no wind, no dusk, no cold, just an endless gray light and the sense that something had just stepped away. I looked down at the floorboards and saw my name carved there. Not freshly, not with a knife, weathered, as if it had been there for decades. When I woke, my name was in my mouth, whispered like a question I wasn't asking. The next morning, I reached Springer. The summit was quiet, no one else there, just the plaque, the final blaze. I touched it with one hand, but it felt wrong, like I'd skipped a step, like I'd missed the point. I didn't cry, didn't laugh. I just stood there until my legs started to cramp. Then I turned around and walked the 8 miles back to the parking lot. There were other hikers there. Friends, maybe. Families. Trail angels waiting with coolers of soda and leftover pizza slices. I didn't talk to them. I got into the shuttle van and rode silently back to town. That should have been it. The end of the story. But the real trail, the true trail, didn't end there. The first night back in a motel, I heard scratching on the door. Not loud, just enough to notice. I thought maybe it was a branch or a raccoon or wind pulling at the seal. But when I opened the door, there was nothing. Only a small pile of leaves, damp, Appalachian. I swept them aside, closed the door, deadbolted it, and still, all night, I felt like someone was curled against my back. Breathing, dry, hollow. I didn't go home right away. I stayed in Georgia. Then drifted. I couch surfed, picked up odd jobs, walked long stretches of road because cars felt wrong. Enclosed. Artificial. The woods had carved something out of me, left a space I didn't know how to refill. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night with soil under my fingernails, or a rock in my pocket I didn't recognize. I started sleeping with the lights on, then with music, then not at all. When I tried to explain it to a friend, they said, "Sounds like you missed the trail." But it wasn't longing, it wasn't nostalgia, it was more like a warning. You left too early. You're not done. A few months ago, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. No name. Just a postcard of the Appalachian Trail. An old one, black and white, faded from age. On the back, in tiny letters, "Did it mark you?" I keep it tucked into my sleeping bag now. Because here's the truth I can't tell anyone else. I've started hiking again. Not for fun. Not for clarity. Not even for redemption. Because when I sleep in a bed too long, I hear them whisper. Because when I stay in one place, I dream of the shelter again, that twisted lean-to in the half-sleep hollow. Because some trails don't let you go. They just pause you until they're ready to continue. And because I know somewhere out there another shelter waits. Not marked. Not mapped, but there. And this time when I find it, I don't think I'll leave. You ever hear a grown man whisper through tears, "Don't look it in the eyes"? Because I have, and I've never camped the same way again. It started with a simple road trip. Me, my wife Kendra, and our dog Max had been planning this getaway for nearly a year. 2 weeks off the grid, off the clock, and out in the Smokies. We had one of those tricked-out Volkswagen camper vans, not one of the modern, sterile types, but the retro Westphalia I'd spent 3 years restoring. Green exterior, pop-up roof, wood-paneled kitchenette. It smelled like cedar and oil and freedom. We weren't strangers to these kinds of trips, but something about the Smoky Mountains pulled us harder than usual. Maybe it was the name, the way it hung in your mouth like fog. Maybe it was the way the photos looked a little haunted, even on the national park site. We told ourselves it was just the elevation, the history, the legends. We should have listened better to the legends. Our plan was simple. Start in Cades Cove, then wind our way along lesser-known trails and dispersed campsites, taking the scenic route through Cataloochee and Clingman's Dome, avoiding the more tourist-heavy zones. We weren't looking for people. We were looking for peace. The first few days were perfect. Morning coffee made over a small propane burner, the clatter of Max's paws echoing through stillness, and soft mist rolling like breath through the trees. It was quiet in the way only mountain forests can be, not silent with small familiar sounds. Songbirds, wind through pine, crickets striking up symphonies at sundown. But around the fourth night, just after we'd been parked off a gravel road near a lesser-used trailhead, Rich Mountain Loop, I think, the forest began to change. I noticed it first in the sound, or rather, the absence of it. It was dusk. Max was curled beside the fire, Kendra was washing out mugs at the water pump, and I was just sitting there, no phone, no books, just the kind of rare stillness that makes you realize how much noise you carry with you. But then, all at once, it stopped. No birds, no insects, no breeze, just the crackle of our little fire, a sound suddenly loud, out of place, like coughing in a cathedral. I called out to Kendra. She didn't answer right away. When she finally turned around, she was holding her arm, not injured, just tight, like she was bracing herself. "Do you hear that?" she asked. I nodded. "Exactly," she said. That night, Max wouldn't sleep inside the van. He paced, not barked, not whined, just paced, slowly, head low, body rigid like a coiled spring. When I tried to bring him in, he let out a deep, guttural growl I'd never heard from him before. This was the same dog who licked the face of a raccoon once. Kendra and I ended up locking the van doors and trying to sleep, but it was like the silence had followed us inside. I could hear the creak of every branch, every shift of the suspension. At some point, I must have dozed off, but it wasn't for long. Something hit the van. Not hard, not loud, more like deliberate. A slow drag along the rear panel, as if someone had placed their palm flat against the back and slid it from one taillight to the other. Kendra's eyes snapped open in the dark, wide as mine. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. We just listened. Another sound, this time something tapping the side window above the sink. Not a knock, a tap. Like the edge of a fingernail. Sharp, rhythmic, precise. I sat up, reached for the flashlight. Max was still outside, but I couldn't hear him anymore. "Kendra," I whispered, "stay here." She shook her head immediately, grabbed my wrist, but I had to look. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe, or that stupid pride you get when you think you're the protector. I eased the sliding door open and stepped out into the dark. The forest wasn't just quiet now, it was dense, pressed in. The air was thick, almost metallic, like ozone after lightning, but sharper, fouler. There was a smell, too. Something between wet fur and copper. "Max," I called low. "Come, buddy." No answer, no rustle, no tag jingle. The flashlight beam cut through the fog, just enough to see shapes, not enough to clarify them. Every branch looked like a hand, every shadow like a crouched figure. I was about to call again when I heard it. Breathing, not close, but not far either. Heavy, strained, like lungs full of water. Then a whisper, carried on the still air. "Don't look it in the eyes." I froze. I wasn't alone. The voice came from maybe 10, 15 feet away, in the dark between two crooked birch trees. I raised my light toward it, but I didn't see anyone. Then the voice again, "If you see it, don't look in its eyes." I backed up, slowly. My heart was pounding so hard it drowned out everything else. Then, rustling. Fast. From all directions. Max came sprinting into view, fur bristled, wild-eyed. He didn't come to me. He bolted straight into the van. Kendra opened the door and yanked him inside. I followed without turning back. I didn't want to see whatever that thing was. I didn't want to test whether the voice was warning me or luring me. We drove. Right then, right there. No gear packed, no fire doused. Just slammed the engine into gear and tore out of that lot like it was flooding. But the Smoky Mountains don't let you go easy. Every road feels like it loops back on itself. Fog thickens. Horizons vanish. We drove for hours, it felt like, yet never passed another vehicle. Eventually, we saw light. A ranger station. Small, weather-beaten, and empty, at least from the outside. But it was real. Tangible. I pulled in hard, engine still running, and rushed up to the door. To my surprise, a man opened it. Late 50s, gaunt, sun-leathered face, park ranger uniform, no badge number. You came from Rich Mountain? He asked before I even said a word. I nodded. He looked past me into the fog behind our van. You're lucky, he said. It doesn't usually stop once it knows your scent. He gestured us inside, quick and urgent, like someone pulling you from the edge of a cliff. The cabin was dim, lit only by a kerosene lantern and an old battery-powered radio crackling some faint gospel station. It smelled like mildew, old sweat, and something burnt. The kind of place that should feel safe just by virtue of its walls. But it didn't. I kept glancing out the window. The fog hadn't lifted. If anything, it seemed thicker now, pooled around the Volkswagen like smoke, clinging to the tires, swallowing the trees just beyond the clearing. The ranger, he never gave us his name, poured us each a chipped enamel mug of lukewarm coffee. His hands trembled, but his eyes were steady, not panicked, resigned. You weren't supposed to camp there, he said, more to the steam rising from his mug than to us. I didn't say anything. Kendra did. There were no signs, just a trailhead, no warnings. He gave a dry, joyless laugh. They don't post signs for what they don't want people asking about. My gut twisted. I glanced at Max. He was curled at Kendra's feet, still shaking. I'd never seen him like that, not even during fireworks. The ranger looked at us, finally. His eyes were the kind that had seen too much and slept too little. You saw it? He asked. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Because the truth was, no, we hadn't seen anything. Not really. I heard someone, I said instead. They said not to look it in the eyes. The ranger nodded slowly, like that confirmed something he didn't want confirmed. Then you were close. Too close. What is it? Kendra asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he got up, crossed to a rusted metal filing cabinet in the corner, and pulled out an old Polaroid photo, yellowing at the edges. He slid it across the table to me. The image was warped, like the film had caught more than it was ready to hold. A dense thicket of woods at night, flash-washed and crooked. And in the center, barely visible unless you looked close, 2 eyes. Not glowing, not red. Just wrong. They weren't reflecting the flash. They were absorbing it, eating it. The thing behind those eyes, whatever it was, had the outline of something vaguely humanoid. But the limbs were too long, too thin, dislocated. It looked like it had been assembled from things that had no business fitting together. We call it a mimic, the ranger said, voice flat. But it's not just sounds it copies. It remembers people, faces, behaviors. It watches, waits, learns. He paused, watching my reaction. And once it chooses someone, it doesn't stop. I pushed the photo back like it burned. Why didn't you warn people? He gave me a look like I'd asked why the sky was dark at night. Because people don't listen, and most who go that deep don't come back to complain. I felt cold settle into my chest like my heart was icing over. I remembered the tapping on the glass, the whisper, the drag of a hand along the van. It had been watching us. You said it remembers people, Kendra said softly. What does that mean for us? The ranger exhaled through his nose and looked away. Then he said something I'll never forget. Some species you can tag and track. Others, you just try not to disturb. But this one adapts. Every time it sees someone and doesn't kill them, it learns how to get closer next time. That silence came back, heavy, unnatural, pressing down through the thin walls of the cabin. I realized I hadn't heard a single bird since we arrived. We need to go, I said. We'll drive all night, leave the park, we'll get to town. The ranger didn't argue. He just looked out the window again. You can try. But if it marked you, distance won't matter. He handed me something, a rusted compass, the needle flickering slightly. Take this. If the needle starts spinning, don't run. Don't speak. Don't even breathe too loud. Just shut everything off and wait. I stared at it. That's it? That's all we can do? That's all anyone's ever done and lived. He saw us to the door, then paused. One more thing, he said, almost an afterthought. If you hear it sounding like someone you know, it's not. We loaded back into the van, hearts pounding, hands cold and unsteady. I drove. Kendra sat next to me. Max wouldn't stop staring out the back window, ears flat, lips trembling but not growling, not barking, just watching. We made it out of the park, or at least I think we did. We got to a small town on the Tennessee side just past midnight, pulled into an empty Walmart parking lot and slept in the van with the windows shut and the curtains drawn. The air felt different, warmer, full of noise again. Crickets, tires, air conditioners humming from motel windows. Normal. But I couldn't sleep because sometime around 2:30 a.m. I woke up to the sound of someone walking around the van. Slow, deliberate. Then a knock, not on the door, on the window right above our heads. Just once, soft, measured. And then a voice, my voice, saying, "It's safe now, come out." I didn't move. Neither did Kendra. We both just lay there under the covers, barely breathing, hearts pounding so loud I thought whatever was outside could hear them. Max growled, low and guttural. Not like a warning, like a threat. A primitive sound I'd never heard from him before. Then silence. A full minute passed, maybe two. The kind of silence that grows teeth the longer it lasts. And then came the second knock, softer this time, followed by my voice again, just inches from the glass. "Please, I need help." But there was no panic in the tone, no urgency, just calm, measured mimicry, like a recording made by something that didn't understand the meaning behind the words, only the rhythm. Then footsteps, slow and unhurried, padding toward the front of the van. I gripped the compass the ranger had given me. The needle was spinning, wildly. I shut my eyes, pressed my back into the cushion. I could feel Kendra trembling beside me. Neither of us spoke, and then nothing. No footsteps, no retreat, no more knocking, just a blank, consuming silence. I don't remember falling asleep. I think I blacked out. When I opened my eyes again, the sun was high. Light filtered through the van curtains, and outside, people, regular people. Grocery carts clattering, a man unloading mulch into a pickup, a woman walking a golden retriever. Everything was fine, except I still had that compass in my hand, and the needle was stuck, not north, not south, pointing directly at Kendra. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She'd already seen it. Her voice came out cracked. It was just a dream, right? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that, but my brain wouldn't let me. We drove for hours that day. No destination, just away. West, mostly. Gas station after gas station. Kendra barely spoke. Max wouldn't eat, and the needle kept twitching, never still, never resting. That night, we found a small paid campground off some old logging road near a river in Arkansas. Not exactly a tourist hotspot, but it was quiet, wooded, isolated. Normally, I would have found that peaceful. Now it just felt like an invitation. Still, we parked, ate, sat by the fire in silence until the stars came out, and even then, we didn't look at the trees too long. Kendra finally broke the quiet. "You believe what the ranger said, don't you?" I nodded. "Then what do we do?" I didn't have an answer. That night, I dreamed I was back in the Smokies. The fog thick around me. I stood in the middle of the trail alone. No van, no dog, no Kendra, just trees stretching forever. I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, it was her, or something wearing her skin, too tall, eyes too still, mouth stretched too wide, and then it spoke, in my voice. "I told you, it's safe now." I woke up gasping, soaked in sweat, but not from fear. From cold, freezing cold like we'd been dropped into a lake at midnight. The van's windows were iced over, frost creeping down the windshield like veins. It was July. The river outside hadn't frozen, the world was still green, but inside the van, winter. I checked the compass. The needle pointed out the window. I pulled back the curtain. There were footprints in the dirt outside. Bare. Human-shaped. But the toes were wrong. Too long, too narrow, like fingers. They circled the van, dozens of them, perfectly spaced, no drag marks, no missteps, as if something had paced around us all night, learning the shape of our lives. Then I noticed something else. Each footprint was paired with another, a perfect mirror, left and right, like someone walking beside their own reflection. I slammed the curtain shut. We didn't speak that morning. We just drove, kept the compass on the dash, kept the heater running, watched the trees like they were closing in. I thought about calling someone, a ranger, a scientist, a priest. But what would I even say? That something was following us? That it knew our voices, our routines, that it was wearing the skin of people we loved, or maybe already inside them? We stopped talking as much, out of fear, I think, of hearing something not quite right, a phrase too rehearsed, a voice too calm, words that should mean comfort but made your skin crawl. The only sound that still felt safe was Max's bark, but then came the night he stopped barking altogether. We were camped at a KOA just north of Memphis, trying to stay near people, under streetlights, close to the hum of civilization. Somewhere with traffic, dogs, kids riding bikes. Noise meant life. Life meant safety, or so we thought. Max didn't make a sound when it happened. Didn't bark, didn't growl, just stood by the sliding van door, tail stiff, eyes locked on something in the dark. I got up, thinking he needed to go out, but he didn't even look at me. Just stared through the windshield as still as stone. "Kendra?" I whispered. She sat up slowly, said nothing. It was like we all knew. Something was out there. Again, the campground was quiet. Not silent. Quiet. Like everyone was still breathing, but holding it in. Lights still on, but windows shut tight. The kind of quiet that feels wrong. I looked out the window. Nothing. Then something moved. Not across the lot. Not along the edge of the trees. It moved through the shadows cast by the street lamp. Not past them. Through them. Like the light couldn't decide if it was real. It walked. No, glided. Past a camper trailer, 2 spots over. No sound. No crunch of gravel. It moved with a grace that was inhuman. Not elegant. Efficient, like a wolf picking its path through snowfall. And then it stopped. Right in front of the lamplight. I should have seen its face, but I didn't. Because it had mine. Not a vague resemblance. It was me. Right down to the faded green hoodie and the scratch on my left eyebrow from when I fell on that hike in the Tetons years ago. Except the eyes. Even in the dark, I could tell those weren't my eyes. Too wide, too black, too hungry. I ducked instinctively and pulled the curtain shut. I couldn't speak. Max whimpered, low and broken. Kendra's voice was shaking. Was it? It was me, I whispered. She didn't say anything after that. Neither of us did. Not for hours. We sat in the dark, pretending the sunlight would erase it all. That maybe the thing out there couldn't survive the dawn. But we were wrong. When morning came, the campground looked normal again. Families grilling breakfast, kids tossing footballs, RVs humming with life. But something felt off, like a layer of reality had been pulled slightly out of alignment. At the bathhouse, a man was brushing his teeth, staring at himself in the mirror. But his reflection wasn't moving with him. He leaned left. The image leaned right. At the dump station, I heard someone laughing. Same pitch, same cadence, twice, simultaneous, from opposite ends of the lot, and then we passed a woman with her golden retriever. Same one from days ago. Same clothes, same dog, same exact smile, like someone had hit copy and paste and forgotten to change a detail. Kendra saw it too. We didn't even get back in the van. We just ran. Didn't pack. Didn't plan. Just got in, started the engine, and drove until the sun was behind us. That night, we parked behind an abandoned roadside diner in Mississippi. Far from people. No lights. No mirrors. No voices but our own. Or so we hoped. Kendra broke the silence first. "We can't keep running." I nodded because I knew she was right. Whatever this thing was, it was spreading, following us, multiplying, learning, using our faces like masks. "What did the ranger mean?" she asked, finally. "A new species?" I remembered his face when he said it, the way he avoided my eyes, the way he handed me the compass like it was all he could offer. "I think it's not just a new species," I said. "I think it's a predator." Kendra leaned forward. "Of what?" I swallowed. My mouth was dry. Of identity. She didn't ask what I meant. She knew. It wasn't just copying us. It was consuming us, erasing us. We sat there listening to the creak of the trees, the soft settling of the van's frame. Then I heard it, a whisper, just outside the passenger side window. I'm cold. It was my voice, but not from the window, from inside the van. I spun around, flashlight in one hand, the hunting knife we kept stashed under the passenger seat in the other. My own voice echoed in my ears again, soft, almost embarrassed. Let me in. The van was sealed. We'd locked every door, bolted the back, even rigged the side door with a carabiner and paracord. There was no way someone was in here with us. But the voice didn't come from outside. It came from behind us. Kendra froze, clutching Max, who was growling now, not the low, uncertain growl from before, but something primal. Terrified. I raised the flashlight, heart hammering. Nobody. I turned slowly, checking the corners, under the fold-down table, under the sink, the closet where we kept our shoes. Still nothing. But then a second flashlight beam struck the interior wall. Mine. But I wasn't moving. The light was coming from behind me. I turned slowly, sick to my stomach. Standing in the center of our van was me. Down to the scuffed boots, the faint grease stain on the hem of my jeans, even the scar on my left knuckle from where I'd burned it lighting a campfire last summer. The other me looked at me, not confused, not afraid, but curious. Like it was learning how to be me in real time. It tilted its head, perfectly mirrored. Every motion I made, it copied. Every shift of weight, every blink. But half a second behind. A delay, like a reflection from a bad connection. Then it spoke. Kendra, it said in my voice, tone soft, calm, almost apologetic. Run. She did. She grabbed Max, kicked open the van door, and ran. I hesitated. That thing in my skin reached toward me. No claws, no weapons, just fingers, human fingers. But they were twitching, too fast, like they were recalibrating with every move. I shoved it back and jumped out after her. We sprinted behind the diner, past rusted propane tanks and cracked dumpsters, not stopping until we hit the overgrown edge of an old playground swallowed by weeds and vines. Only then did I look back. The van door was swinging open in the wind, but no one was following. No one needed to. Because I knew whatever had climbed inside that van, it wasn't going to chase us. It was going to become me. And once it had, it would keep driving, keep moving, keep living, under my name, wearing my voice, sleeping beside the woman I loved, replacing me, not violently, not through fear or force, just through certainty. That's how the species worked. Not by fighting, by fitting in, one detail at a time, one memory at a time, one face at a time. We didn't sleep that night, didn't talk either, just sat beneath the rusted frame of a teeter-totter, listening to the night breathe around us. Try not to listen too closely, because the wind wasn't just rustling the trees anymore. It was saying things, mimicking laughter, footsteps, whispers that sounded like old road trip stories we'd told each other. Remember when the river flooded in Utah? You always say that when you're nervous. I'm still me, Kendra. It was wearing my voice like a jacket, mocking me with it. We drove before dawn, didn't care which way, just away, but deep down, I knew. We weren't escaping anything. We were just falling behind. This species, it wasn't bound to a campground anymore. It had seen highways. It had tasted names. It had understood the power of a friendly smile, a worn hoodie, a familiar face, and I was starting to forget whether I was still the real me. By the time we crossed the Tennessee border and saw the first signs for Cherokee, the sun was bleeding out behind us, casting the sky in a bruised red that looked more like infection than sunset. Neither of us had said much. I caught Kendra looking at me through the rearview mirror more than once. Not in anger, not even in fear, in doubt. And that was worse. It felt like there was something loose inside me. Some part of my personality that had once been bolted down was now rattling around, knocking into things. I laughed too quickly, repeated questions, fumbled with my words when I never used to. I couldn't even tell if I was doing it on purpose or not. I wanted to ask her, Do you still think it's me? But I didn't, because the second I asked, I wouldn't just be a man afraid of being replaced. I'd be a man who already had been, and she'd know. We pulled off a side road just before a place called Deep Creek. The campsite wasn't official. It was one of those unmarked ones, flat dirt, circle of rocks from a long dead fire, some beer cans rusted into the ground. But it was quiet, and there were no other people around. I parked the van facing the woods, open terrain behind us, the kind of layout that made you feel less trapped. Kendra didn't speak until we started unloading the camp chairs. "You know that ranger back at the entrance?" she said quietly. "He said something weird when we checked in." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She didn't look up, just kept unfolding her chair. "He asked what county I was born in, not state. County. County." Then he looked at my driver's license, stared at it for way too long, and handed it back with both hands, like it was hot. That didn't sound weird in the traditional sense, but it did sound off. I nodded slowly. Maybe he's had some fake IDs come through, tourists. "No," she said, sitting down hard. "He said something else too after I turned away. I heard him whisper it under his breath." "What?" She hesitated. Then, "He said one of them already got out." We both went still. The trees didn't move, not from wind, not from birds, not from anything, just silence. Then something snapped deep in the woods. Not the crisp crack of a twig, something wetter, like a spine. We didn't speak again that night. We didn't build a fire, didn't heat dinner. Just sat inside the van with the blackout curtains pulled and Max curled between us, the silence pressing in so hard it made my ears ring. I woke up around 3 a.m. The van was swaying gently, not from wind, but like someone was rocking it. I sat up slowly. Kendra was still asleep, but Max was gone. My stomach sank. I opened the side door carefully. Max was sitting just outside the van, perfectly still, staring into the trees. His ears were pinned back, not alert, not afraid, submissive. I whispered his name and he didn't even blink, just kept staring. I stepped out barefoot, cold dew soaking through the cuffs of my jeans. "Max?" That's when I saw the shadow between the trees. Long, lean, moving in a circle, not running, not stalking, pacing. And Max, my dog who had growled at thunder, chased off coyotes, and nearly bit a guy for getting too close to our gear once, was just watching it like he knew better. And then the shadow spoke, not to me, to him. "Good boy," in my voice. Only it wasn't quite right. The rhythm was off, just a half beat behind, like it was learning. I didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't move. That voice, my voice, coming from the trees, wasn't just mimicry. It was something more intimate than that. It knew how I spoke, the cadence, the slight rasp when I said certain words, but it repeated them back like an echo that hadn't quite learned to live. Max finally turned his head to look at me, and when he did, I swear to God, his eyes weren't just confused. They were ashamed, like he'd done something wrong. I scooped him up and backed into the van, locking the doors behind me. I slid down into the driver's seat, hands shaking on the wheel even though I wasn't starting the engine yet. I couldn't. Not without waking Kendra. But I didn't want to wake her either. Because the second she opened her eyes, this world, the one where something with my voice was walking through the trees, would become real. So I just sat there, all the air gone from my lungs, and outside the pacing didn't stop. It circled, again and again. Then the voice came back. Still mine, but more certain this time, like it had rehearsed. "Let me in." It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. Every syllable drilled into me like ice through bone. The door behind me clicked once, unlocked. No one had touched it. My head whipped around, nothing there. Then the other side clicked too. Max started growling, low and broken, like he was trying to stop himself, but couldn't help it. His body trembled against me. I grabbed the lock manually and shoved it down hard. Tried the next one, then the next, clicking them all shut again like some twisted, frantic game of whack-a-mole. Silence. Not even crickets outside now, not even the wind, until a soft tap sounded on the windshield. A single perfect knock. Kendra gasped awake behind me. I didn't turn around, just stared at the windshield. trying to make sense of the impossible, because it wasn't a hand I saw there. Pressed against the glass, smudged and glistening with dew, was a face. My face. But wrong. The mouth was too wide. The skin was paler than it should have been, pores like swollen eggs. The eyes were mine, but empty. Like someone had carved the idea of me out of wax and just got tired halfway through. It tilted its head slowly, and then it grinned. Not in menace, in satisfaction. Like it was proud of how well it was learning to be me. Kendra screamed. I turned, grabbed the key from the side hook, jammed it into the ignition. The headlights flared to life, and just like that, the thing vanished. Not into the woods, not into the dark, just gone. As if it had never been there at all. We didn't speak for the next 5 miles. Kendra just stared out the window, eyes glassy and mouth tight, as I drove in silence along the curving roads of the Smokies. My heart still pounded with every mile marker we passed. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was hoarse. What the hell was that? I didn't answer right away, because I didn't have a name for it. All I knew was the deep, instinctual sickness in my gut, the kind that comes from seeing something that should never exist, something wearing your face. We finally pulled into one of those scenic overlooks, just past a broken section of old wooden guardrail. I cut the engine and turned to her. I think that's what the ranger meant, about the new species. She shook her head slowly, her eyes brimming. That wasn't a species, that was me. The words came out sharper than I intended. I looked away, then back. No, it wanted to be me, and it almost got in. She rubbed her face, trying to collect herself. Max whined in the back seat, unsettled, pressing his head into the blankets like he was trying to burrow out of the world. I don't think this is about you, she said, her voice quiet now. I think it's about us, about people who live on the road, people like us. I frowned. What do you mean? Remember that couple at the last camp who said they saw a man pacing in the woods, same build, same walk, but when they called out, he turned, and it wasn't the same man at all. She looked at me, something breaking open in her voice. What if these things, whatever they are, they're studying us? Travelers. Van lifers, nomads, people who don't belong to any one place. The idea sat in my chest like wet cement, because it made sense. We're harder to track, harder to explain when we disappear. We live on the fringes already, disconnected from neighbors, towns, systems. Our routines are irregular. Our faces aren't known. We're perfect prey. Kendra reached for my hand. I don't think we're the first, and I don't think we're going to be the last. I wanted to say something hopeful, something sturdy and confident that would make her feel safe again, but all I could say was, then we need to leave. No. She squeezed my hand harder. We need to warn people. We spent the next 3 hours driving toward the nearest ranger station. The woods felt narrower as we went, the trees pressing in, branches scratching the sides of the van like fingernails. At one point, we passed a Volkswagen bus just like ours parked at the edge of a turnout. Same color, same curtains in the window, same bungee cord holding the rear hatch, but nobody inside. No license plate. Just empty, like it had been copied. I didn't stop, didn't even slow down. When we reached the ranger station, we both half ran inside. It was a squat wooden building with a single desk, a corkboard of missing hiker posters, and a man in his early 60s in full uniform. He looked up from his thermos. I figured you'd be back. My heart dropped. You saw it too, I said. The ranger nodded, then gestured for us to come around the counter. He opened a metal drawer and pulled out a file labeled in marker. Unconfirmed species. Reports 2019 present. He flipped it open and pushed a few photos toward us. Most were blurry. One was a motion-triggered camera photo from deep woods. The silhouette was unmistakable. My build. But the limbs were just slightly wrong, like a child's drawing of a person. All the parts in the right places, just off by enough to make your stomach turn. They don't attack. Not directly, the ranger said. They replace. Learn you first. Follow you. Wait for when you're at your most scattered, tired, scared, unsure. Then they slip in and see if anyone notices the difference. Kendra whispered, Has anyone ever been taken? The ranger's eyes dropped to the desk, then back up. We think so. Maybe dozens, maybe more. It's hard to tell once they've copied you. They get good. I felt the air leave my lungs. My hand instinctively moved to Max, who was still trembling by the door. The ranger leaned in. I've only seen one way to break their focus. If they think you're onto them, really onto them, they scatter. They don't like being seen for what they are. It's like it burns them. I nodded. So what do we do? He gave a thin, bitter smile. You go. Tonight. Don't stop. Don't sleep. Drive until you're outside the Smokies. And when you're safe, tell everyone, especially the ones living out of vans, the ones nobody counts. Then he added, and if you ever see yourself again, don't talk to it. We didn't even buckle our seatbelts until we were back on the highway, pushing west toward Knoxville. I don't think either of us blinked for the first 10 miles. Max was curled tight in the back, eyes locked to the rear windows like he expected to see something catch up to us in the dark. Maybe he did. I kept checking the rearview mirror. Every set of headlights behind us made my chest tighten, like any one of them might hold a version of myself that wasn't me, like it would pull up beside us, smile with my teeth, and wave. We drove straight through the night, no music, no talking, just the sound of wind slapping against the old frame of the Volkswagen and the occasional hiss of semi-trucks blasting past us on the interstate. Every time we pulled into a rest stop, I made Kendra wait inside while I did a lap of the lot, looking for other vans, other travelers. I started noticing something I hadn't before. There were fewer Volkswagens than there used to be, a lot fewer. We'd see maybe one or two rigs every few hundred miles, but most were closed up, dark, like nobody had been inside for weeks. Some had open doors or lights on without movement. One had a radio playing quietly, even though there was no one at the wheel. We didn't stop, didn't talk, didn't trust anyone. When we finally crossed out of Tennessee, Kendra let out a breath that sounded like she'd been holding it since the ranger's office. We ended up parking at a truck stop outside of Asheville, tucked between two semis and wrapped in shadow. It didn't feel like safety, just less danger. Kendra curled up on the front bench and stared at the dashboard. I keep thinking about what it wanted, she said, that thing that looked like you. I didn't answer. I don't think it was just copying. I think it wanted to replace. And I think if I had let it in, her voice cracked. You wouldn't be here. I reached across and squeezed her hand. But I am, she nodded. This time. It's been 6 weeks since we left the Smokies. We've stayed moving, never parked more than a night or two in the same place. I installed a cheap motion detector on the side of the van, and I keep a hatchet in the driver's side door now. We stopped telling people where we're headed next. We stopped trusting strangers who seem too familiar. We stopped trusting each other for a while, too. Not because we don't love each other, but because once you've seen something wear your own skin, doubt becomes a permanent shadow in your mind. I'd catch Kendra watching me when I thought I was alone, studying the way I held a spoon, the rhythm of my voice. I caught myself doing it to her, too. We never said it out loud, but we both knew we were waiting for the other to blink wrong. And the worst part? Sometimes I wasn't sure if I'd even know, because that's how they win. They don't scream. They don't chase you through the trees or claw at the windows. They become you, slowly, carefully, perfectly, until the only one who knows something's wrong is the dog. And by then, it's too late. We finally reached the edge of a red desert in New Mexico when I decided to record this. Not because I feel safe now, but because if I don't say this out loud, I feel like I'll disappear into my own skin. Like the silence is its own kind of erasure. So here it is. If you live out of your van, if you chase those quiet roads, those lonely campsites, those fog-wrapped mornings, you need to listen to me. The forests in the Great Smoky Mountains are older than language, older than memory. They carry things we were never meant to understand. Not every shadow is just a tree. Not every sound is an owl, and not every version of you belongs in this world. So if you ever hear someone calling your name just beyond the tree line, If you ever see a face in the woods that looks too much like your own, if you ever feel a version of yourself waiting to take the wheel, do not let it in, because there's something out there in those mountains, and it's learning, watching, becoming. And the next time someone disappears in the Smokies, no one will even realize they're gone because something else will be standing in their place. I never thought I'd be scared of the desert. Not really. I grew up on stories of wide open skies, red rock canyons that stretch into forever, stars so bright they don't feel real. I thought the Southwest was empty, beautiful, and harsh in a way that made you feel alive, but never haunted, never cursed, and definitely never watched. I was wrong. It started in early spring, right after my friend Marcus bought his new fifth wheel and invited me to tag along on a trip through Arizona and New Mexico. He was 38, divorced, clean-cut, an ex-Army mechanic who liked old guitars and quiet places. I'd known him for years, met him during a camping forum meetup in Utah, and we'd stayed in touch ever since. I trusted him, and that trust, it kept me from bailing when I should have listened to my gut. We set off from Sedona, headed southeast toward the Gila National Forest. He had his fifth wheel hitched behind a matte black F-250. I had my old Volkswagen Westfalia, a battered red 89 that I'd rebuilt myself. No AC, a few rust spots, but she ran like a dream and felt like home. We weren't in any rush. The plan was loose. Camp wherever felt right. No reservations, no packed campgrounds. Just solitude. Dirt roads, open skies. That was the idea anyway. But the first real warning came just after we passed through a tiny New Mexican town called Aragon. Not even a town, really. A few homes, a boarded-up gas station, a rusted-out church with no windows. There was a little side road, barely paved, that led off into the woods toward a spot Marcus said he'd found on an overlanding forum. Remote, he'd grinned, tapping the dash. No service, no people, just us and nature. I should have turned back right then. The road snaked through a canyon for over an hour, and the deeper we got, the more the air started to feel thick. That's the only word I can use. Thick, like something was hanging low in the trees. It wasn't just the altitude. I've camped high before. This was different. The silence felt loaded, heavy, like something waiting for a cue. We found the site around 4 p.m., a clearing near the end of a wash, surrounded by ponderosa pines and craggy rock faces. No signs of recent campers. No trash. No fire rings. It was clean. Too clean. Like no one had touched it in a long, long time. Marcus pulled in first and parked on the far side of the clearing. I parked facing him, maybe 30 yards apart. We both stepped out at the same time, me stretching my back, him lighting a cigarette, and just stood there, looking around. The wind had that desert smell, dry bark, sagebrush, sun on stone. But something underneath it didn't sit right. There was this faint chemical sting in the air, not strong, but present, like dried out bleach or rusted battery acid, not enough to gag on, just enough to keep you on edge. Smell that? I asked. Marcus shrugged. Just the pines. But he wrinkled his nose. That night, after we set up, we made a small fire and cooked canned chili on my jet boil. It was calm, dead quiet. No animals, no crickets, not even the wind through the trees. And as much as I wanted to chalk it up to elevation or bad timing, I couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't want us there. We didn't talk about it. We just sat by the fire, sipping warm beer, pretending everything felt normal. Around 10 p.m., I crawled into my van and left the side window cracked for air. I remember staring up at the sky through the glass, all those stars, and thinking, maybe I'm just tired. I must have drifted off around midnight. And then something woke me up. It wasn't loud, not at first, just this subtle scraping noise, like fabric against metal. I blinked, heart already thudding. For a second, I thought maybe Marcus was out smoking again. But when I sat up and looked through the cracked window, I saw his trailer, dark and still. No lights, no movement. The noise came again. Scrape, pause, then a soft tap, not against the van, against the rocks near the edge of the clearing. Then another tap. I slowly slid to the front seat and peered through the windshield. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, about 20 feet away, I caught the edge of movement. A tall shadow, lanky, almost skeletal, just barely visible between the trees. The moonlight was just strong enough to catch it. But the figure, it didn't move like a deer. It didn't shuffle like a person. It leaned, slow and precise, like it was testing its weight against gravity. Like it didn't quite belong in the shape it was in. I ducked down before it could see me. Heart pounding so hard I thought I'd throw up. I waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. The scraping stopped. Silence again. The next morning, I didn't say anything to Marcus right away, just walked over to his trailer with a coffee mug in hand and tried to act casual. But when I saw him, I knew immediately he hadn't slept either. His eyes were bloodshot. He was pale. "You hear something last night?" I asked. He hesitated, then quietly, "Thought it was you." "What?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I thought you were outside, walking around. I heard footsteps, something brushing up against the trailer." I didn't answer. We just stared at each other, both of us suddenly 10 degrees colder. Neither of us admitted what we were really thinking. Not yet. That came later. But I saw it in his face. Same fear I felt. Same doubt. We should have left that morning, packed up and driven straight out. But we didn't. And I still don't know why. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the stubborn part of you that doesn't want to believe you're scared of trees and shadows. Maybe we thought whatever happened was just weird, but explainable. We stayed. That afternoon, Marcus said he was going to hike up the slope behind the clearing to get a better view of the valley. Said he wanted to see if there was any water nearby. I stayed behind. My gut was twisting too much to go anywhere. I worked on organizing the van, folding blankets, tidying up the kitchenette, anything to keep my mind from replaying that sound, that figure, that horrible way it leaned. An hour passed, then 2. No sign of Marcus. I called his name once, then louder, but no response. I grabbed my flashlight and started up the trail he'd taken. A narrow, rocky slope choked with brush and deadfall. About 100 yards up, I found something strange, a single boot print in the dry dust, just one. And beside it, a long, deep scrape in the soil, as if something had been dragged. Not heavy, just enough to disturb the dirt. I stopped cold. That's when I smelled it again, that faint chemical sting, stronger now, more sour. And under it, something rotting. Not animal, not meat, more like old plastic, burned insulation, something synthetic, something dead, but not alive to begin with. I turned back. I didn't run. I wanted to. Every part of me screamed to tear back down that trail, leap into my van, and burn rubber out of that cursed clearing. But something told me that if I made too much noise, if I acted like prey, whatever was up there would follow. So I backed down the slope, slow and careful, my eyes on the trees the whole time. The wind had shifted. What had been still and breathless was now moving in quiet gusts, making the branches creak like old floorboards. The sky overhead had clouded without warning, casting long, strange shadows that seemed to twitch when I wasn't looking directly at them. I made it back to the van. I didn't go inside. Instead, I stood by the sliding door, facing the trail, waiting for Marcus. Every few seconds, I whispered his name. Not loud, just enough that maybe, if he was close, he'd hear me. Another 20 minutes passed. Still no sign. Then I saw movement. Not up the trail, but down the other side of the wash, across from the fire pit. A figure, limping, coming from a direction Marcus never walked. I tensed, adrenaline on full blast, ready to bolt, but then I heard his voice. "Hey," he called out hoarsely. I'm okay. I ran toward him. His face was slick with sweat. One pant leg was torn. A deep red welt was forming along his temple like he'd hit something hard. "What happened?" I asked. He shook his head. "I don't know. I went up the ridge, maybe a mile, saw what looked like an old mining shack. Just ruins, really. Then I smelled something, like copper and plastic. Got dizzy. Next thing I know, I'm waking up halfway down the other side of the slope." I stared at him. "You passed out?" "Maybe," he muttered. "Or, I don't know. It's like something pulled the energy out of me. Like I got too close to a circuit box with a short." He looked down at his hands, visibly trembling. We didn't talk much the rest of the day, just sat under the awning of his trailer, sipping Gatorade, pretending the forest wasn't closing in around us. That night, we kept the fire going late. Neither of us wanted to go to bed. The quiet was different now. It wasn't still. It was hushed, like something was moving around us, just far enough to stay unseen. You know that feeling when someone stands behind you without touching you? That faint static along your skin? That's what it felt like. I remember watching Marcus's face across the fire, the way the flames reflected in his wide, unmoving eyes. He was listening, just like I was, straining to hear something under the crackle of burning pine. It started again around 1 a.m. Soft, footsteps, not regular, not two-legged, something loping, dragging, circling. Then came the sounds, tapping against stone like fingers or claws trying to find the right rhythm. I don't even know how to describe it clearly. It was intentional. That was the terrifying part. It wasn't random. It was like it wanted us to hear it, to let us know it was still out there. We didn't sleep, just sat by the dying fire until the sky started turning blue. At dawn, we agreed. We had to go. There was no pretending anymore. We packed up in silence. Every so often, I'd glance at the tree line, half expecting to see that tall figure watching from the shadows, but it never showed itself in daylight. That was its rule, I think. It wanted night. By 7 a.m., we were on the move. Marcus led the way in his truck, and I followed in the Westphalia. The road out felt longer than the road in, every twist of the canyon a new place to be cornered. I kept expecting my engine to die, the tires to go flat, the steering to lock up, for something, anything, to keep me from escaping. But we made it out. We didn't speak until we hit the main road again, until our phones got a signal and the sun had fully risen over the jagged ridges. Then Marcus's voice crackled through the walkie. Let's not stop until we're back in a real town. I just nodded, forgetting for a moment he couldn't see me. We ended up in Reserve, New Mexico. A gas station, a diner, a cheap motel. That's where we talked. Really talked. He told me about the shack, said it had strange markings on the stones, carved symbols he didn't recognize, half buried under soot and moss. He said he got too close, felt something vibrating through the ground, and then nothing. I asked if he thought it was some kind of old spiritual site or maybe a mining collapse with residual gas. Something scientific, logical. He shook his head. I felt watched before I even got to it. And after, it was like something followed me back down. I didn't see it, but I knew it was behind me. Even after I blacked out, I could feel it waiting. We didn't go back for proof. We didn't want proof. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Something changed in Marcus after that trip. He stopped answering my texts, wouldn't respond to calls. I figured he needed time, maybe had some kind of PTSD from whatever happened out there. Then, 3 weeks later, I got a voicemail. Just static at first, then his voice whispering. They don't leave the woods, but they send pieces. The message ended with a sound I still can't place, like radio interference run through broken lungs. I drove out to his place near Flagstaff the next day. The trailer was there, locked, lights off, but Marcus was gone. Neighbors said he'd left 2 nights earlier, said he was going to make it right. No one knew where. He never came back. I filed a missing person report, but nothing ever came of it. They said he'd probably wandered into the mountains, got lost, or maybe he didn't want to be found. But I know better. Something followed him back, and I think it's still looking for something. I didn't go camping again for a while after that. Months passed. The Westphalia sat idle in the gravel pull-off behind my apartment, tires half deflated, sap from the tree above painting the roof with sticky yellow blotches. I kept telling myself I'd clean it up, take it out again, reclaim that part of my life. But every time I reached for the keys, something in me locked up. It wasn't just fear, it was uncertainty. I didn't know where the line was anymore between the natural and unnatural, between explainable danger and something else. That trip with Marcus had changed my internal map. Places that once looked like open roads and hidden gems now felt like traps, like they might shift the moment I looked away. I kept thinking about the tapping in the woods, about the symbols on that crumbled shack, about the way Marcus's voice sounded in that last message, like it wasn't entirely his anymore. But the thing about fear is it has layers. It curls up and hides under the day-to-day, but it never goes away. It waits for you to test it, to step just far enough outside your comfort zone for it to snap its jaws again. For me, that test came in the form of an email from a guy named Jesse. Said he ran into Marcus a few times while boondocking around Arizona. Said he'd heard from a ranger friend that Marcus might have gone looking for an old spiritual site in the Gila backcountry. Said there were stories about it, whispers passed between Apache families and old-timers, but nothing written down. Nothing official. And then Jesse said something I couldn't stop thinking about. He said he'd been there too. But he got out before it got dark. That was the difference. I tried to call him. No answer. The email account bounced when I replied. Maybe that should have been enough for me to let it go, but it wasn't. If there was someone else who had made it out, someone who'd seen what we'd seen, I needed to know more. I needed to understand what had happened to Marcus and what I'd brought back with me, because something had followed me, too. It didn't make itself known right away, but it waited, in dreams mostly. A silhouette behind trees that didn't exist. The sound of footsteps on dry gravel when no one else was in the room. Shadows flickering in the reflection of my kitchen window, but never in the room itself. Once I woke up with 3 long scratches down the side of my RV's paint, fresh, sharp, like something had tried to peel it open. Another time I found a dead crow laid carefully on my doorstep, its head turned at an unnatural angle, its beak cracked open as if mid-scream. No blood, no cause, just placed there. A gift. I started keeping my lights on all night. Didn't matter, it didn't need dark anymore. I think once it touches you, really touches you, it doesn't leave. It just waits until you're vulnerable again, until you drift back into the places it can follow freely. Eventually I broke. I couldn't take the isolation anymore. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I went back out there on my own terms, if I camped somewhere else entirely and proved to myself that I still had control, the grip it had on me would loosen. So I chose a spot far from New Mexico. Arizona, sure, but deeper into the desert, rockier, hotter, more open. A place called Vulture Gulch, old mining land that had become BLM territory. Dry washes, distant ridges, and miles of saguaro sentinels standing like warning signs. I picked it because of the name. I know that sounds stupid, but there was something honest about it. Vulture Gulch. It didn't pretend to be anything but hostile. If something went wrong there, at least I could say I saw it coming. I got there in late afternoon, parked the Westphalia in the shadow of a red cliff, not far from a dry riverbed. No one else was around. Not for miles. I hadn't passed a soul since leaving the last gas station outside Wickenburg, and that was what I wanted. Silence, distance, a clean break. At first, it felt like it might work. I set up my folding chair beside the van, cracked open a beer, and watched the sky burn through its golden hour. Bats flickered between the rocks as the sun dropped low. The wind kicked up dust devils that danced just beyond my reach. I could almost pretend things were normal again. But then came the sound. It wasn't loud. Not at first, just a low humming, like someone pressing a tuning fork into stone, vibrating through the bones of the desert itself. I stood up, scanning the ridges. Nothing moved. The humming stopped, and then I saw it. Not a figure this time. Not a shadow, but a circle of stone, maybe 10 feet wide, 100 yards off. I hadn't noticed it before. It hadn't been there. I swear it hadn't been there. Rocks carefully placed, not natural scatter, too clean, too symmetrical. I walked toward it without meaning to. The closer I got, the heavier my chest became, like breathing through thick cloth. The air grew warmer, but not from the sun. This heat came from below. It radiated up through the soles of my boots, humming with each step. Inside the circle, the dirt was black, charred, as if a fire had once burned there, so hot it melted the sand into glass. I bent down, and that's when I saw it, a shape carved into the center. Not deep, not crude, deliberate, a spiral with 4 spokes, like a wheel, but broken. It was the same symbol Marcus had drawn in his notebook the night before he disappeared. I felt the hair on my arms rise, and behind me, the humming started again. The humming wasn't mechanical. It wasn't wind or bees or a distant engine struggling through the mountains. It was low, rhythmic, alive. I could feel it more than hear it, like a warning running through my jawbone, through the fillings in my teeth, through every fragile thread inside my chest that told me to run. I backed out of the circle. The stones around me seemed to thrum with tension, like they were waiting for something, like they were listening. The moment I stepped outside that ring, the hum stopped. Dead silence. The kind that doesn't just fill your ears. It presses into them, a vacuum, a mute scream. I turned back toward the van, walking fast now, the edges of my vision starting to vibrate with a low, gray fuzz. I didn't look behind me. I couldn't. Not until I reached the side of the Westphalia and slammed the door shut behind me. I locked it. Every latch, every window. I even shut the curtains like that thin piece of cloth could keep whatever that was out. And then I waited. Minutes, hours maybe. It got dark fast. The desert loses its heat like a dying breath. 1 minute you're sweating in the red sun, the next you're freezing in the absence of it. That night, it felt like the heat had been pulled away all at once. The kind of cold that doesn't belong. The kind of cold that feels targeted. Around midnight, the tapping started. Not on the windows, not on the door. From beneath the van, a single sharp knock, like someone rapping their knuckles against the undercarriage. Then a pause, then 2 more, then silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I lay in the dark, gripping the handle of the fire extinguisher like it was a weapon. There were no lights outside, no moon, no headlights, no campfires in the distance. Just that crushing dark and the echo of those 3 knocks on the metal belly of my RV. At 2:17 a.m., it happened again. The same knock, same rhythm. Once, pause, twice. Like it was asking something or answering. At dawn, I finally opened the door. There were no footprints, no drag marks, nothing out of place, except the circle. It was gone. Every stone removed, the black dirt scrubbed clean, like it had never existed. But I knew what I'd seen. I felt what I'd felt. And more than that, I knew I wasn't supposed to be here anymore. I packed the van in record time and got back on the road with my stomach in knots and my hands still shaking. That morning sun didn't bring any warmth. It just revealed how exposed I really was. I didn't stop until I hit the edge of Quartzsite, pulled into a tiny gas station off the main drag, and sat there for 20 minutes before I could even get out. My nerves were shot, my mind trying to catch up with the things my body had already decided to fear. That's when I saw the old man, sitting on a bench outside the station, staring straight at me like he'd been expecting me. I nodded. He didn't smile, didn't move. Just said, "Been near the circle, haven't you?" I froze. "How'd you know that?" I asked, instantly on edge. He tapped his temple. "Things leave marks, not the kind you see with mirrors, the kind that live in your bones. You carry it now." I didn't want to play the game. I told myself to get in the van and leave, but my voice cracked when I asked, "What is it? What's in that place?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Used to be something sacred, long before we ever carved borders into this land. Something ancient, not evil, not good, just other. It watches, it waits, it follows those who disrespect it, those who linger. And the circle, his eyes narrowed, circle ain't to summon, it's to contain. A long pause. "You walked inside it, didn't you?" I nodded slow. He just sighed. "You should leave Arizona now. Don't sleep in the same place twice. Don't answer knocks after midnight. And for God's sake, if you see her, don't let her speak." Who? But he was already standing, already walking away. "Too late to unsee it," he muttered. Then he was gone. I did as he said. Got back in the van, headed west without a real plan, just a gut feeling and the echo of those knocks still in my spine. I didn't stop to sleep, just kept driving, deep into California, then north, but it didn't help. Everywhere I parked, I felt it, a presence just outside the glass, watching, not always acting, but waiting. And then one night in the Mojave, It finally tried to speak. The Mojave's silence is brutal. It's not peaceful, not calming. It's like the whole desert is holding its breath, listening for the wrong sound. That night, I pulled off a dirt road miles past anything with a name. The sky was endless, full of stars that felt too close, too bright. And yet everything beneath them was wrong. I knew better, but I was exhausted. I hadn't slept in 3 nights. Not really. I kept driving deeper into the southwest, thinking I could leave it behind. Whatever it was. That feeling. That thing. But something always caught up. I parked in a shallow washout, surrounded by brittle sagebrush and moonlit rock. The temperature dropped like a switch had been flipped. No wind, no sounds, not even insects. I told myself I'd only sleep for an hour or 2. I left the driver's seat tilted back, didn't bother crawling into the bunk. I wanted to be ready to go if something happened. I left the keys in the ignition. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up because something was breathing behind the glass. It wasn't human, too slow, too deep, rasping like a throat that hadn't spoken in 1,000 years. And it wasn't at the window. It was inside the van. I didn't move. I didn't open my eyes. The breathing got closer. Then, a whisper, a voice not made for sound sliding through my mind like oil. I saw you in the circle. I sat up too fast, smacked my head on the ceiling. My vision went white with stars, but I scrambled for the key, turned it over. Nothing. Dead. No lights. No engine. No dashboard glow. The entire system had gone cold. Behind me, something shifted. Cloth. Plastic. Weight. Then knock. Once. Pause. Twice. From inside the cabinets, I ripped the door open and flung myself outside into the cold air, barefoot, half-blind, shaking. My breath caught in my throat, lungs frozen in panic. I looked back. The van door slammed shut on its own, and there, in the window, a face. No eyes, just the impression of one. Shimmering. Pale. She didn't blink. She mouthed a single word, "Stay." Then she was gone. The van lights came on by themselves. The engine turned over. I didn't think. I ran to the driver's seat, peeled out of that wash, nearly tipped the whole rig sideways, getting back to the road. The headlights caught something in the mirror, and I made the mistake of looking just the desert, and one perfect black circle etched in the dirt where my tires had been. I drove for hours, days. I lost track. No matter how far I went, I couldn't shake it. The face, the whisper, that word. I tried sleeping in parking lots, grocery stores, crowded RV parks. It didn't matter. At 2:17 a.m., I'd always hear the knock. Sometimes once, sometimes more. Sometimes I'd hear her breathing, closer now. Sometimes I'd hear her voice, but never see her again, not fully. Only the face, only the circle, only that cold. It's been 3 months since Arizona. I haven't told anyone until now, not because I'm afraid of being called crazy. I passed that point weeks ago. It's because I think talking about her gives her more ground to stand on. I think remembering her brings her closer. But if you're still listening, really listening, then maybe you've seen her too. Or maybe you will. Maybe you'll park somewhere too quiet, walk a little too far off the trail, find a circle made of stone and curiosity. If that happens, don't go in. Don't break the circle. Don't answer the knock. And if you ever hear a voice say, "Stay, get in your van," don't look back, because she's not the only one out there. And out here in the Southwest, some things are older than the desert, older than us, and they're still hungry. I tried to stop camping after that. Really, I did. I parked outside cities. I stayed in well-lit lots. I even checked into motels, slept in the bed, left the van locked and untouched outside. But nothing ever felt safe anymore. Not truly, because after Arizona, I stopped trusting silence. The next story isn't mine, but I was there for the end of it. A man named Eli pulled into the campground just north of Taos, New Mexico, a few days after a cold snap had sent most other travelers further south. He had an old casita, the kind that looks like a fiberglass egg hitched behind a weathered Toyota. He was quiet, mid-40s maybe, eyes always scanning the tree line. You could tell something was off just by the way he watched the woods. I was in the site across from him. At the time, I still thought company made things safer. It doesn't. That second night, I saw Eli standing near the tree line at dusk. No flashlight, no jacket. He was barefoot in the frost-covered dirt, just standing there, staring into the cottonwoods like something was calling him. I called out, "You all right, man?" He didn't move, didn't answer. I stepped closer, and then he walked straight into the dark, not in a panicked way, not like someone got lost. He followed something. I stood there with my flashlight for a while, yelling. No answer, no sounds, just that cold. Eventually, I went back to the casita and knocked. No one answered, but something inside answered back. 3 sharp knocks from the inside. I backed away. I don't scare easily, not anymore. But that sound, it wasn't just a noise. It was deliberate. Mocking. The ranger came by the next morning, and I told him Eli hadn't returned. He shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first," he said. I asked him what that meant. He sighed. Told me locals don't stay in that campground after the first frost. "They call it the thin tree line," he said, "because things come through it when the ground turns hard." He told me stories, dozens of them. People who left their campers unlocked and vanished. People who returned but weren't the same. Who'd stand in front of mirrors for hours whispering in tongues then vanish again. I asked him if they ever searched the woods. He said they stopped after one of their own came back with bite marks all over his hands, but no sign of what did it. No animal teeth, just human, but smaller. That night, Eli's camper door was open. I didn't open it. I didn't need to, because just before sunrise, I saw him sitting at the tree line again. But this time, he wasn't barefoot. He wasn't cold. He was staring at me, and he smiled. The kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, like he remembered being Eli, but wasn't anymore. He raised one hand and pointed, not at the van, at me. I shut the curtains, locked the doors, turned on every light. Didn't sleep. In the morning, his casita was gone. No tire tracks, no footprints. No one believed me, not really. But that ranger never came back either. A different one showed up 2 days later, wouldn't even look me in the eye when I asked about him. Just said, sometimes people stay too long near the tree line. Now, I stay away from New Mexico altogether, because I think it followed me once. Just once. I heard the knock again weeks later in Texas. Same rhythm. Same time. But this time it came from beneath the van. I didn't get out. I just drove. Because whatever walked back from that tree line wearing Eli's face wasn't him. And if something ever looks at you like it remembers being human, but doesn't care anymore, don't stare back, don't speak, and never, ever follow it into the trees. I don't talk to strangers on the road much anymore, not because I'm unfriendly, but because I've learned that out here, in the vast, open dark, not everyone you meet wants help. Some just want you to see them, to acknowledge them. And that's how they get in. I made the mistake of picking up a hitchhiker once near the Arizona-Utah border. It was a desert stretch, empty for miles, and I thought I was doing the right thing. He looked normal, middle-aged, calm, carried a canvas duffel, no smile. He didn't say a word for the first 20 minutes, just stared out the window like something was hunting him in the clouds. Then, quietly, he asked if I'd ever seen one. I asked, "Seen what?" He turned to me, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in weeks. "The mimics," he said, "the ones that wear your shape." I laughed, nervously, tried to brush it off. He didn't smile. "They only come when you're alone," he whispered, "when you've been out here too long, when the land starts to forget your name." I tried to change the subject, but he didn't want conversation. He just wanted to warn me. He said, "The first sign is your own reflection looking wrong. The second is hearing your voice outside the RV when no one's there. And the third is you not being the one who wakes up in the morning." He asked if I'd ever woken up feeling wrong. If you ever forget what you were doing before you fell asleep, that's how they begin. That's when I noticed the smell, not rot, not death, but something synthetic, like old latex gloves or melted plastic. And then he asked me to pull over. No reason, no warning. He just said, "This is far enough." There wasn't even a road there, just sagebrush and open red dust. He got out, took his bag, then turned and said something that still plays in my head when the wind gets too quiet. Be careful out here. They like people who keep moving. Makes it easier to take your shape without anyone noticing. I never saw him again, not on the roads, not in town, not in any missing persons report. But 2 weeks later, parked near Flagstaff, I swear to God I heard someone walking around the RV at 2 a.m. I checked every window, nothing. Then I heard the voice, my voice, from right outside the driver's door, whispering my name. Not yelling, just whispering, like it was practicing. I drove with the headlights off for an hour, didn't stop till the sun came up. That was the moment I realized something about this whole life, this whole dream of freedom and open road and wild places. Out here, we're not alone, not in the way you think. Nature has rules, predators, weather, logic. But there's something older under the dirt in the Southwest, older than roads, older than the land we stole. It doesn't care about your maps or your locks. It watches, it waits, and it doesn't take you all at once. Sometimes it just erases a little bit of you, your face in the mirror, your memory of last night, your reason for camping in the first place. And then one day, the person walking out of the RV in the morning, it's not you anymore. It just remembers the shape of you. So yeah, I still camp, I still chase that horizon, but I do it with my eyes wide open now. I check the mirrors, I listen to the quiet. I never ignore the smell of heat and dust when it turns sour. And if you ever hear your own voice calling from the dark, don't answer, not even once. Because out here in the Southwest, some things don't need a key. They just need your name. And if they learn it, they'll wear you like a memory, forever.